just advise members, the committee will be recorded and broadcast throughout Parliament and also Linda, can you silence yourself? Or is it Linda? Oh, sorry, apologies, Linda. Apologies. I thought it was coming from online.
Very good.
So, you were looking guilty in front of me, that's why I said that, Linda, sorry. So, anyway, just to advise everybody in the public gallery, devices can be used as long as they're in airplane mode and not permitted to take photographs or record any of the meeting. We have apologies from Alan Chambers, and we also have Linda joining us remotely today. Are there members aware of any other apologies? No? Okay, Chair's business. Just to let everybody know, I had the opportunity this week, Sunday past, to speak at the launch of Palliative Care Week at the MAC. So I thought it was a really beneficial event for myself, and a good launch to Palliative Care Week. It was positive and gave a chance to highlight the importance, and I know other members have attended at other events throughout this week as well. I also attended along with the committee clerk at the APG and Terminal Illness on Tuesday, just to give a bit of an update on where we're at with regard to our inquiry report. And also I attended the Chief Nursing Officers Conference yesterday in Le Mans Hotel, so that was for me actually a very positive day spent with nurses. They were discussing lots of stuff, so that was good. Moving on then, draft minutes. Can I refer members to draft minutes of the meeting held on the 3rd of July 2025, page 6. Everybody content? Yep, thank you. Matters arising. If members could refer to page 3 of our table papers. So we obviously had our committee clinic on Thursday the 4th. I wasn't able to attend the first 2 events, but it was the remaining 4 or 5, and I thought that was very useful. I actually thought the whole thing was quite useful. So there's a memo outlining the suggested actions from that meeting, and it's included in our tabled pack. So do members have any comments or questions in relation to that? Matters rising. Yes.
Other than an apology, my sincere apologies. I had every intention of being here on Thursday, but everything that could go wrong did go wrong. So my.
Okay. So.
Chair.
Yes, Danny.
Just with the last one, with the Alliance for Choice one, I think we got a response from the Minister. Can we share that with Alliance for Choice?
Yep.
All right.
I mean, I think we said that to them. So we obviously, some of the issues they had raised during the meeting, we had written previously to the Minister, had got a response during the summer, so we hadn't time to do that. So no, I think it's appropriate that we forward that on to them for comment.
Sure, I was also at the policing board and I couldn't make it, but I heard that it was actually a really constructive event.
Yes. Okay, everybody content then with Danny's amendment and all the other actions? Okay, thank you. So, moving on then, just item number 5 of the agenda. So, it's an oral briefing on proposed amendments to the SVGO Crime and Policing Bill. Can I refer members to tab 5, page 21 of our pack, and just want to welcome the departmental officials to the meeting. So, can I welcome Martina Moore, Director of Family and Children's Policy, Lynsey Armstrong, Head of Protection, Domestic and Sexual Abuse Unit, and Teresa Mallon, Child Protection, Domestic and Sexual Abuse Unit. So you're all very welcome. I'm just going to invite you to make some opening remarks and then we'll take questions.
Okay, thank you. So good afternoon, Chair and Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today to provide you with an update on the proposed amendments to the Safeguarding Vulnerable Groups NI Order 2007. So I'm aware the committee's already received information from us, which I hope you found useful and will inform our discussion. So this afternoon I'm just going to begin with some background information about the criminal records checks. So as you know, Access NI issues criminal record checks in Northern Ireland, and that's to support employers to make decisions about the suitability of individuals for particular roles. The checks they issue are for the most vulnerable roles, and they include whether that individual has been barred by the Disclosure and Barring Service, DBS, from working in regulated activity with children and or adults. The DBS, I don't know if you know, maintains 2 separate lists. So one is of those who've been barred from working in regulated activity, one for adults and one for those barred from working with children, and that's due to their having caused or posed a risk of harm to children and or adults. So the regulated activity is defined in legislation and covers sensitive roles and activities working closely with children and vulnerable adults, so for example teaching. And the rules in regulated activity are therefore eligible for the highest level of criminal record check issued by Access NI. So that's the enhanced check, but also the check of the barred list. Under the current definition of regulated activity, there is an exemption for those work which is subject to day-to-day supervision of another person. That means that people in roles which involve close work with children are not in regulated activity if they're working under supervision. This supervision exemption means that employers are not able to check whether such people are on the children's barred list. It does create a safeguarding risk. It means potentially that somebody who DBS considers to pose a risk of harm to children, such that they've been barred from working in regulated activity with them, could nevertheless work with them under supervision and without that employer's knowledge. So we were informed by the Home Office that amendments were being made to the Safeguarding Vulnerable Groups Act, and they were being brought forward to see the removal of that supervision exemption from that definition of regulated activity. That amendment really came as a result of a recommendation from the Independent Inquiry into Child Sex Abuse in England and Wales, and that recommendation was that anyone engaging in work or volunteering with children on a frequent basis should be able to check whether they've been barred by DBS from working with children, including where that role is supervised. And the UK government then obviously agreed with that recommendation, and that clause 105 of the Crime and Policing Bill will give effect to that recommendation in England and Wales. The amendment, a written copy of the amendment to the Safeguarding Vulnerable Groups Order, which we provided to you in my letter of the 28th of March, would give effect to this recommendation in Northern Ireland and align us with that clause. It removes that supervision exemption. That will allow employers to check to access enhanced criminal records checks, which will include a check of the children's barred list. Bringing these supervised roles into regulated activity would also then make it an offence for the barred person to apply or undertake these roles, and an offence for the employer to knowingly engage with them in these roles. And we believe this measure will reduce the risk of a barred person working with children in a supervised capacity. Although a devolved matter, it was more expedient to progress the amendment via the Crime and Policing Bill, and it's really ensuring that Northern Ireland is in line with England and Wales and removes the risk of a potential safeguarding gap in Northern Ireland. We are aware, as a devolved matter, it's not usual process, but we had a very narrow window of opportunity to align with the Criminal Policing Bill, and that narrow window, as you know from my previous letter, also didn't allow us to carry out a formal consultation. However, we did carry out targeted stakeholder engagement, writing to key safeguarding stakeholders, other government departments, and obviously this committee. We got 9 responses in total, 2 offered no comment, and the other 7 were broadly supportive. We've also recently engaged with the Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission, and they've considered the proposed amendments will enhance safeguarding protection for children and young people in Northern Ireland, and deemed it to be a proportionate response to the risk of children being exposed to potential perpetrators. The provision for this amendment is one of a number that have been proposed. The others are the responsibility of the Department of Justice. So currently Justice colleagues are taking forward the required legislative consent motion and are attending a session with their committee today on those measures. Also just like to take the opportunity to highlight a slight amendment to the timetabling of the measures since my letter of the 26th of June. At this stage, the indicative Westminster timeline is that the Lords Committee stage will begin on the 27th of October and run to the 24th of November, with report stage on the 8th of December and royal assent then expected around the 26th of January. In closing, Chair, just I hope you find the briefing and the letters we previously sent you on that useful, and happy to take any questions today.
Okay, thank you. So 9 responses to the consultation. You said 7 broadly happy and 2 offered no comment.
Yeah.
I'd be interested. How do you respond to a consultation without offering a comment? What does that mean?
Just said that they just made the response was no comment on that. Older People's Commissioner and Department of Infrastructure had no comment to make. Okay, probably not relevant, maybe to their.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Well.
Fair enough. That you think it would have just been better not responding than responding with a no comment, but fair enough. One other thing. So, what impact or what assessment of impact is this piece of legislation likely to have on access NI checks? Because I know organisations and institutions, you know, there's a lengthy delay as it is. Is this going to add to that, and is there additional resources going to be there to help with that?
Yeah, we don't foresee that, in that these people are already actually eligible for an enhanced check, so they should already be getting the enhanced check. This additionality is just putting them through the barred list check. So at this point, with our kind of consultation around this is that it shouldn't increase timing on this. You know, anybody in these roles should already be going through that enhanced check. This just then says you have to also check the barred list, which is quite a straightforward process in that. We have just actually, out of interest, set up a DBS forum, which I am now chairing. So I have Department of Education, Education Authority, Access NI, PSNI and DBS. And that's actually it was a really good forum now we've pulled together to start looking at wider issues, to be honest with you, around safeguarding in Northern Ireland and where there is potential gaps, and even operationally what we can do to make safeguarding more robust. But I think a key part of that forum now will be, obviously, if this goes through, making sure the implementation of this is robust as possible and people actually understand what it means, because while I wouldn't like to think so, there is a possibility there's somebody working in a supervised role right now who's on a barred list. You know, and understanding what that actually means. That means that if this does go through, that's an offence that's being created. So, you know, we need to work to make sure people understand the implications of that. So that's what we'll need to look at in terms of time. And ideally, we'd like to make sure that we commence this in line with the Home Office to keep us all in the same. But I think our stakeholder forum will be really good in terms of working that through. And the Children's Commissioner raised that in their response, really just communications is vital, because what they don't want this to end up has actually having an unintended consequence of people now thinking you don't have to supervise people in supervised roles. That's not the point. If you're in a supervised role, you're still in a supervised role. This is just meaning now you're eligible to be checked to see if you're on the barred list or not.
Okay.
Doesn't make yeah.
It makes sense to me, but there's a bit of work to be done there.
And it's quite a complex.
It is.
It's complex legislation around this, we found, and I think that was one of the reasons we've set up the forum, because I've found from other engagements we've had, so there's people in Northern Ireland no access NI.
Yeah.
It's a household name. DBS isn't. So DBS have actually put a Northern Ireland engagement person in now, which is great, and we're working now very closely with that organisation in terms of making sure that we're highlighting, and now they've working with us in their stats. The number of referrals in Northern Ireland have definitely gone up. But I think there's more work to be done as well to make sure that people understand when you can refer. And I think sometimes there's a misunderstanding here that you can only go to DBS if an offence is being created. But actually, if you take the decision to remove somebody from regulated activity because you have a concern or you believe a risk of harm has been posed, you can still refer. So there's still, I think, work to be done in that space. And identifying gaps like this is critical, and making sure we close them.
Fair enough. Nola?
Thank you very much. I think it is quite complex because you know some people won't realise the difference. So and I was reading through the briefing paper, and there's a lot of sports organisations and supervised versus regulated. Are there any other examples in terms of a real life example of where this would affect, in terms of what is regulated versus someone who's being supervised in kind of working with the children, and what would the after effect be?
I think the one we think most about is the classroom assistant, isn't it? It's nearly the easiest one. I mean, I suppose one of the things we need to do around this is make sure, as part of that engagement, people do understand what that actually looks like. And I think everybody's got different interpretations of that, and I think that's probably one of the biggest issues at the minute. But if you think of a classroom assistant at the minute, generally they will be supervised by a teacher. And I think the issue at the minute is the employers can't access the check. This is about access to a check. There could be other instances, I suppose, perhaps in sports clubs and that, where people would be working, where you might have
assistant coaches.
Yeah, do you know what I mean? I think of local football clubs, you might have a coach, but you maybe have other people helping. And we need to be very clear with them, because it's not even that simple. Regulated activity then comes down to you have to be working
3 days in every 30 days, or between the hours of 2 a.m. and 6 a.m. in the morning. So it won't impact those occasional volunteers in school. So a parent who's maybe going to help on a school trip, it has to be somebody that's in there frequently.
Yeah.
And then in terms of people believing that access and eyes should be sufficient, how are we going to illustrate that actually this is just an enhanced safeguarding tool?
I think it'll be all around our communications and that, and I think most of the people, and I think we got that from the sports, particularly the sports is actually a really good example, I think, in Northern Ireland, because the sports strategic group really do seem to have a real stronghold on this. They really understand, in terms of where the kind of risks are and how they then mitigate those and make sure you get those checks done. The problem at the minute is they can't get at that check. So I think a lot of those organisations do know about them. The reason we've also set up the kind of stakeholder group is because one of the things come out is there's a large number, even for example, of faith groups in Northern Ireland. I think when we looked at it, there's maybe over 1,000. So some of them might just be somebody who's a preacher in their own home, running a very local religious group, and that's why we set this up, to make sure that we actually get the messages out there and start communicating as far and wide as we can about what this actually means, not just in terms of this change, but what are the safeguarding legislation in Northern Ireland, what are the risks, how do you mitigate those risks, what are the processes you have to have in place, and how you access them. So we've just, like I said, put that group together. We just had our first meeting there in terms of reference. We're having another one now in the next couple of weeks, really workshopping with those round. Because the police, we see a lot of this as well. What is it we need to do? So again, it comes back to engagement and communication. This is just one step, but I think it's an important step in closing the gap to make sure we do that. The big thing I think we need to do now is communication. Make sure there's a real understanding. As I said, we know the big groups are well versed in this, and a lot of organisations will have people that they employ specifically to do safeguarding. That we need to get to those groups at a more local level.
And you mentioned there quite a few times that it was about access as well, it's going through Westminster, so it does, and being changed there. Does that mean that the list already exists of those who are barred? And so
DBS will have a barred list at the minute, so they'll have a list of people who are barred from participating in regulated activity. There will be Northern Ireland people on that list. The issue at the minute is there's a potential that there's somebody sitting on that list who's working under supervision with children. And because they're working under supervision with children, it's not being deemed as regulated activity. They do not have to bring that forward. The employer has no way of finding that out. So there is a list there. So part of the communications around this, again, it's about making that very, very clear. Now, I wouldn't like to think there are, but there could be. And it's about
who
once.
accesses it now?
Sorry?
Who accesses it now?
You can access that list.
It's accessed through Access NI.
But you have to be looking for somebody in regulated activity.
You have to be eligible for that level of check.
This is where the confusion then might lie, is because it's access through Access NI, but people go through Access NI checks, but that's not sufficient because
so an Access NI enhanced check is what most people will get who are they'll get it if they're under supervision. Now it's about, and I'll be honest with you, before I came into this post I didn't know there was DBS. It's about understanding that there's also a barred list, and it's about how you access that barred list. And so really there's a barred list, there's people on that list right now in Northern Ireland. At the minute there's a potential somebody on that list.
Is it similar to the policing barred list that exists in terms of mechanisms? It's for different issues, so it's not for children. It's just interesting. It's the only other experience that I've had in terms of a barred list. But
there's a whole process they have to go through to get on. I mean, obviously, if somebody's convicted of something, that's okay, that's clear. They're put on the barred list. But you can also refer somebody if there's a risk posed, and there's supposed the whole process DBS has to go through to weigh that up, in terms of whether. And when somebody's put on the barred list, they're notified that they've been put on the barred list, so they know they're on the barred list.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's.
Thank you.
Colin.
Thank you. I just shuddered when I heard barred list. It reminds me of the pubs in the town whenever I was much younger about people getting barred. But there's just a couple. There's maybe a wee confusion bit that I have there, because I think this is absolutely essential, because I know, having been involved in Access NI and filling out forms for people and getting people through that process, at the end of the day, it's unlikely that anything untoward's going to happen within your organisation or within the place that you're volunteering. It's more likely that relationship that's built up with a child or young person, and then it happens off-site or in the community. So somebody being in a supervised role, if they wanted to be in a sort of predator role, they could start to build up a relationship with somebody and then maybe realise that it's somebody that lives around the corner from them, and it'll happen away from it. So we really do need to know, there really shouldn't be any role of anybody working with young people where they're not checked against that list for that particular issue. But given that you go through if you're going through the Access NI check at the minute for a role where you would have that contact with young people, currently you're automatically checked against the barring list. Isn't that the way it is at present?
Yes, if you're in regulated activity, then that employer will go and get an enhanced with barred list check done on you.
It's important to note as well that it's an eligibility. It's not, the employers don't have to do that. They're eligible to do it, but they are committing an offence if they employ somebody who is barred.
And then this will just effectively lift those that are technically at the moment within a supervised role. Just everybody's going to be in the enhanced role essentially, because if they're working at all subject to that role, then they will need to have that check done.
Yeah.
If they're working in regulated activity.
Everybody will be in regulated activity now essentially.
Except where the time is maybe just
less than this.
But it's just perhaps somebody who's maybe just volunteering ad hoc, so they're not building up that time.
I thought what was crucial, and as well, if I heard you right, this is also it will be an offence for a person to apply for a job that requires the check done on the barring list if they know that they're on it.
They'll be creating a offence by knowingly working in regulated activity. Yeah.
And I think that's important, because that's a really important point where an employer is sitting down to do that enhanced check, to fill out the paperwork. If they're clearly saying to the person it'll be an offence for you to complete this if you're on that list and you know it, because then why would you do it? Why would you fill out the form? You know it's going to come back and say that you're on the list.
On the barred list.
And therefore, why would you apply for this? So it's a good way of screening that type of person out the door and not having them anywhere near it. So
that'll be part of our communications as well about this, being very clear that it's not just the employer, but it's the individual creating the offence as well, and they'll be causing the offence.
Was that the same before? That wasn't an offence for them if they were going for where they were being supervised. There was no offence
because it wasn't regulated activity.
It wasn't regulated. Okay, well that's good. But I mean, I think that's a real strengthening of what's there, and ultimately helps to protect children, young people, and that's vulnerable people. That's really important. Thank you, Chair.
Linda.
Thank you, Chair. Just a very quick, it's a point, I suppose, more than a question. Thank you for the presentation, Martina. It actually made it very clear. Just, you've already covered one of the issues. I think you're right around the concern that this would give some kind of false confidence. So just need to make sure that doesn't happen. And then just in terms of that forum that's set up and to look at what other gaps there may potentially be. If we can get a written paper back at some stage to the committee just to say, you know, what work has been done and what gaps have potentially been identified and what's going to be done then to deal with those. And I'm not expecting that very soon. I know obviously this is in its infancy. And then my final point is just that issue that you raised around people not understanding what DBS is, you know, the Access NI and DBS. And I'll be honest, I was one of those people for a quite considerable period of time, or who can be referred or who can be dealt with through that process. So I think it's really important that we get an understanding. Again, I'm happy for that to be in writing, of what work is going to be done to highlight that and to ensure that people do understand what DBS is and how somebody can be referred in, because it's all very well if somebody is on that list and they will come up, but there are potentially many people out there who are not on the list because people don't understand the DBS process. So I think it is important that we find a way to highlight that. And there's potential there through the policing end of things as well, Martina, around PCSPs and different kinds of work there, and engaging with communities and helping them understand.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like I said, the group is just set up, but we can obviously bring that briefing paper. We already have some ideas about what we need to do, perhaps where there's legislation, but also I think a lot of this is around what we can do operationally as well. And one of the key things we want to start off with was that engagement piece. And the police are up front in this. I think they were one of the first people that came to us around this as well, and that's when we decided we needed to have a forum to really bring together those kind of that have that sort of responsibility for safeguarding in Northern Ireland together to see what we can do to make the system more robust. So absolutely,
very good.
We'll bring all that forward.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Linda. Danny.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for that. There's obviously a very, very serious issue and right to tighten it up as much as possible just to protect people. Two quick questions. Will it be backdated? Will employers now have to look at everybody who's in a supervised role now? Because I know Access NI, you have the application to Access NI is on an application. Yeah.
Funny, it's a question that has come up now. We liaise closely with Home Office in this, and they are not going down that issue of retrospective checks. I think they're kind of thinking of it in terms of going to what we were saying a minute ago. This is about communications and being very clear to people that actually it's down an offence. So you know, if you are on the list, you should bring yourself forward. I think one of the things we need to do is work very closely with our stakeholders around that. And, you know, it's not necessarily in the legislation, is it something we should do? I think we will need to work with them again.
The scenario that you spoke of then, where there is somebody who's on the barred list who is already working in a supervised role, will not be checked.
I'm not saying I think we just need to work with stakeholders. There'll be an offence from this coming in that they're in it. I take your point. If somebody is in is now going to be in regulated activity who's on the barred list and has knowingly put themselves into that position, I think it's just working with obviously Access NI, working with those bodies that will be impacted by this. So if you think about it, perhaps the likes of the Education Authority and all, to see how we would manage that. But it's something we can definitely feed back. But it's something that we haven't taken a complete steer on yet. We just know that the Home Office are not retrospectively, I think, doing it.
Why not?
I'm not really sure of the rationale. I think it's probably more to do with processes and that. And, you know, I think the other thing we think about this is, and this is probably one of the gaps we were talking about a minute ago, there's no kind of set recheck legislation either. You know, if somebody, you get a check at a point in time.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And if you think about, there's people in regulated activity who probably went into regulated activity 20, 30 years ago maybe. You know, there's no recheck, so I think that's something we're looking to see, how do we do that moving forward as well. But yeah, I'll take that away and come back. But I think it's more just working with Access and how they do that. And then obviously I think where the biggest impacts would be, education I think would probably be one. And it's understanding what their processes are at the minute, because people can, like I said, what we found from the little bit of engagement we have had around this is that people do different things. So some sectors are very, very au fait with this, are on it, they're checking regularly, they're keeping up to date with the checks, they're rechecking. Others perhaps aren't, and they're maybe getting that check initially but not rechecking. So I think it's about impact. Yeah, but happy to come back.
No, thank you, if you wouldn't mind. And second question, so it's clear in my head, how are people informed that they're on the barred list? Are they informed? Is it court process? Do the PSNI tell them? Is it letter or?
DBS tell them.
It's a letter.
So
it's a letter
so
from
it's a
DBS.
letter
Yeah.
that they get?
They get informing them they're now on the board list.
That is an issue that we have raised with DBS previously, because the employers aren't informed. It is just the barred person, and obviously that comes with risks itself. So we are engaging with the Home Office about that.
Yeah, we need the Home Office to make that change. So this is probably even put in the briefing, this is one of the issues we've identified. So at the minute, if you're put in the barred list, you're told you're put in the barred list.
That's it, nobody else.
Yeah, so somebody who's being checked and it's came through clear, they're not on the barred list, they go to work, later on they do something, they get put in the barred list, they're told they're on the barred list. The person employs them is not told they're on the barred list. So again, you're relying on that person to tell you, I'm not in the barred list. So we have been heavily, I think, negotiating with the Home Office to bring this forward. And I think there is a willingness, they said, on the part of their ministers now, but I suppose we're just trying to work through that process with them. We think we would like the employers to be notified.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
Okay, thank you. I mean, the all members have raised some very important points, so it would be good to be kept up to date with all of that, because it's a very important issue, and you and us have identified some gaps, so we'd like to know just exactly where that goes in the future. Colin?
Sorry, it's just one point building on what Danny had said. Is the offence retrospective? So, Joey, this legislation will create an offence for somebody to apply for the job and to be in that role. Is that offence back the way? Because at least then there might be comfort in saying somebody, if you're on the barring list and you're in a post, that's an offence. That might make them a little bit more concerned and think to themselves, I maybe should exit here, because they'll be actively breaking the law by being in the role. Whereas if it's not retrospective, then they aren't breaking the law by being in a supervised role, having been cleared. But
the offence is for them to be knowingly engaging in activity. So as of the day this comes in, they're creating an offence.
So it does work back the way that if they were involved in,
if they continue to work in that regard,
You have to bear in mind that they wouldn't have been in regulated activity until this amendment comes through. So the offence isn't currently being committed. So
they're not committing the offence right now.
Your question, there's no offence because they're not in regulated activity at the
today.
moment.
But once the legislation comes in, they will be creating an offence.
At that time, they won't have been committing it previously.
Yeah.
So we need to be clear in our communications when the minute this comes in, and you're in that activity and you're on that list, regardless of what's happened in the past, you are now knowingly creating an offence.
That's good. That's good.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So moving on then to item number 6. So SL1 from the HSE, exemptions from charges, payments and remission of charges. So can I refer members to our papers, tab 6. This includes SL1 from the department, that's page 35. And also we have a draft SR at page 38. So we're going to have officials coming in now. So can I welcome Raymond Curran, who's Head of Ophthalmic Services, and Noel Griffin, Head of Healthcare and EU Citizens' Rights Branch. Thank you very much for providing the paper, and I'm going to ask you just to give a brief overview, and then we'll take some questions if there are any.
Thank you very much. I suppose this is bringing in legislation in respect of universal credit, which by rights should have been done quite some time ago, and there was work done back in 2016, 2017 to prepare for the introduction of universal credit. It relates to the Help with Healthcare scheme, which provides passported benefit, provides free healthcare and free dentistry and ophthalmology treatment for people on certain benefits. And traditionally, it is a list of benefits that you're automatically, if you're on those benefits, you're automatically passported onto it. If you're not on one of those automatically passported benefits, you fill in an application form, and if it's in the low income scheme, and if you meet the requirements, then you will be granted a certificate to give you either discounted or free treatment. When universal credit was coming in, there was work done to try and see what could we do, how would we do that, and what would happen with regards to making that an automatic passporting benefit. Unfortunately, because it's not really a direct crossover between previous benefits and universal credit, it's a much wider, bigger system, so it wasn't deemed as possible to just go everybody that's on universal credit. So what was done at the time was some work was just kind of go, the policy aim was to go, well, let's broadly look at the number of people that are in receipt of help with healthcare costs at the moment and roughly keep the same numbers of people as we move across to universal credit. There will be some maybe winners and losers there, but we broadly keep the same system going through. There was work done by the department here on that. There was even a consultation gone through. But there was a collapse in the executive, and there was also issues where in GB, while they were introducing this, that it was becoming a little bit more difficult, and they had a number of teething issues. So at that time, there was a decision taken to just wait and see what was happening with GB. And then once they had it sorted out and ironed out the difficulties, then we could follow in a much easier position. I suppose subsequent to that, it took some time for an executive to be set up. Then through the pandemic, this work was not prioritised until last year when I was asked to take this on. So we looked at this issue. We looked at the previous work that had been done, and unfortunately, I suppose we had covered. It's more difficult now looking at it than it was back then. From a data point of view, because back then before everybody moved to universal credit, we had a much easier understanding within the department of what the population on the benefits was. So when we looked at this, we realised that by adapting the GB thresholds, we would have a reduction in the number of people that would be automatically passported under universal credit. But I suppose looking at in our consultation that we went out in the consultation that we went out earlier this year, we set out that moving everybody on universal credit was not financially possible. Moving with the GB thresholds would leave up to about 18% of people no longer that previously would have been automatically passported not. However, we're not dropping the thresholds, so everybody that is eligible for help with health costs can apply for it, even if they're not automatically passported. So that's a bit of a roundabout and convoluted and bit of a mess, but it is quite a complicated system, because effectively it is a benefit that we run from the Department of Health that is impacted so much by benefit legislation. It is based on income support legislation. So it's not the sort of thing that we would normally as a department be involved in. So it's been quite a complicated, messy situation, and we also wouldn't have access to the data. So what we are proposing with our legislation is to move with the GB thresholds, in spite of the fact that they haven't been looked at since they were introduced back in 2015. We are in consultation with colleagues across GB to ensure that when we can all move together to look at those thresholds again, that we will do it together. And I suppose that in short, with this, we're not reduced, because people are now moved on to universal credit, they have lost their automatic passporting. So with this, what we're doing is we're reintroducing the automatic passporting for most of the people that have migrated onto universal credit. Those that are not automatically passported will still be able to apply through filling out the application form for the low income scheme. So it's not a reduction in accessibility. It's a reintroduction of automatic eligibility for 82% of who would have been eligible before.
So first of all, I think it's to be welcomed that there's movement in this issue. Because up to this point, people had lost their entitlement, and there was issues of complications in terms of filling out the forms. But you're essentially saying that we now have a complicated system. Everybody in universal credit being applicable would have been much easier, but you didn't go for that for cost reasons. So can I ask you what the value in terms of cost is for people for the scheme that you now have compared to everybody in the north on universal credit benefiting?
Well, it was looking at the actual cost is difficult, because it is a demand-led scheme.
You said that we couldn't afford it.
Well, it's more that it would have been an extra 30. It would have been an extra. I think the percentage was an extra 30,000 people would have been eligible at the time when we were looking at the statistics.
But you're assuming that every one of those 30,000. Sorry for interrupting you, but you're assuming that every one of those 30,000 is going for dental treatment or going for an.
Well, that's what you. But unfortunately, in the current financial constraints that we have within the department. It would not be possible for us to introduce a scheme that we had no financial control over the numbers of people that could come in, that would be open-ended, because that would obviously, is where the Minister has been very clear about the money that's been granted to the department is below that which has been objectively assessed as necessary to meet the need. So for us to introduce something that then was open-ended, that would then allow for that we could not guarantee, because it might not be an issue now, but 2 to 3 years' time, it would be open-ended. We would have no financial controls over that if we were to say that everybody would be passported onto it. And it would also bring us out of line with the rest with GB.
So, and I'm not harassing you here, but you were the one that said that we couldn't afford it. So I'm just trying to get some sense of a figure.
It was very difficult. I suppose, as in what was happened back in 2016-17, what we looked more was at the numbers of people rather than the cost of that, because there are other implications of, especially since the pandemic, there are issues of pressure with regards to either dentistry and ophthalmology. So the numbers can be lower because it's difficult to find a dentist to get an appointment with. So it's very difficult for us to clearly put on a figure to sort of say that's what this is the cost, because there are so many other things out there to do that. What we can do is look and say more broadly about the number of people. And I think it would have been an extra approximately 30,000 people within that would have been eligible for it at that time. But there's also, with universal credit, there are issues about people who are in receipt of universal credit. People are in receipt of universal credit but not getting a payment. So there are, and that can be quite a high salary and still be in receipt of it. So there are, it would be just very an open-ended situation.
So just explain this to me again. So you're saying then, because we couldn't go to everybody universally and universal credit, what you have done is worked out a scenario where 82% of people who previously would have been entitled to this would get it. So that to me leaves the 18% of people.
Well,
this is 18% of
the 82% is because we are looking to adopt the same thresholds that they have in the rest of GB. There was an analysis done at that point in time, but unfortunately that was analysis based on data that's no longer available. We don't like at that point in time we had access to data because it was been done across the whole UK and it was done based on existing benefits. The benefit situation is very different now to what it was then, and we were only able to get so much data from DFC, DWP to do any sort of analysis. So we were not able to, because at that point in time what you just said is numbers of people getting it now. What would be the thresholds to get that number of people under the new system? But we don't have that number of people anymore there. So everybody's kind of moved around. So what really needs to happen is to develop, and that's what we were discussing with colleagues across GB, a threshold that is independent and that can be simply updated through time, along with maybe whether that's attached to the cost to the minimum living wage or something. So it's to have a formula that's actually relevant to everybody being on the same benefit.
And I mean, I do welcome the fact that people now can get it, but I think it's important that the people who can't afford this kind of treatment are not cut off. So I certainly think that you should be working towards bringing those previous 18% and more.
But it's not that those those people are ineligible. They have to. It's just that they do have to do a more complicated process, and we do accept that is not an ideal situation.
And that's my next question then, is just how are you going to inform people out there about this process and help people go through the process?
Well, we were discussing earlier today with colleagues on our communications policy as we go forward, and making sure that primarily those people from the operational point of view were aware, and I suppose what we're also engaging with Department for Communities in informing them as to when the change comes through, so because they would have a large responsibility with regards to forms and the information going out to the jobs and benefits offices.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you, Nola.
Hello. Sorry for the confusion there. Didn't realise I was being called. I'm just trying to look it up because I am confused still a little bit about people who are potentially left out of the scheme. And I was just trying to find through the briefing paper, whenever you were saying about the data was difficult to compare to the people who were eligible in order to budget. Did you compare the data to the people who accessed? So the people who actually
we did look at that, but ultimately, if we hadn't had the pandemic, that data would have been probably more accurate. But we didn't have, because as we're looking at that, the challenges, going back through the years, the data that we have going back through from that, because of the pandemic, everything kind of stopped. So we didn't have, and as it's coming back, so we didn't have enough data to be able to look and sort of say, these are the numbers of people accessing it, but also, are these the number of people that want to access it? Because obviously we know, particularly in dentistry, there are issues with people being able to get appointments with the dentists. So by looking at, if we only looked at the data of the people that were actually in receipt of free treatment, we would be getting a subset. We'd be getting both the people that were able to get treatment, and then out of that, the people that were able to get treatment that got free treatment. So,
except that would still be a definitive number compared to leaving it open-ended, and you can't use open-end. You said it wasn't best to use open-ended.
But that would be a lower number than what we would be bringing in for.
But if then, I'm sure that there would be some sort of formula for offsetting that against the issue of those who are able to access treatment, because there's the dental access scheme for those who are on, I think it is for those who are on a lower income, and people who can't access dentists. So there would have been would there not have been other methods of which you could say who actually needed it? But also, in terms of people who, like Chair said, who aren't eligible anymore and can't afford it, but still can't afford it. It's creating another problem. And there's, how do we deal and mitigate for those people? Because at the minute, like dentistry, like you said, people can't get appointments. We don't have enough NHS dentists. So it seems like the figures and the data that is based on or was not based on, it's just not, it doesn't seem as reliable to me as what it could be.
Well, like if we take the whole low income scheme and help with healthcare costs, and the eligibility for that is based on income support, that threshold doesn't change. So as a result of this, there is no change in the eligibility. It doesn't reduce anybody's eligibility of it. So what happened was, prior to universal credit, people who were on benefits, the legacy benefits, were automatically passported. When universal credit came in and they moved across, if you were not automatically passported, you could still apply to the HC1 form under the low income scheme. That will remain the state, and the thresholds for that are tied to income support, and while that does change, that goes up, so that overall eligibility will stay exactly the same under the current system. So there's nobody within this that loses eligibility. Okay. What it is that most of those people will have moved across universal credit, and as such will have lost their automatic passporting benefit and will have been required to fill in a form.
But they don't have to do that anymore. So
what this is doing is this is reintroducing the automatic passporting benefit for the vast majority, although there is still a significant number of people that will still have to fill in that form, and that's something that there have been discussions with the Department for Community to sort of see if there is a way that for those that are on universal credit, that there could be some sort of streamlining of that.
And how does that work in terms of if people need to actually get treatment there and then? Is it a reimbursement or is it a payment?
Well, like in the end, you can apply for. I think you can. Like I'm just thinking the low income scheme. I think you can apply for refunds. So there is a form for applying for something after you've paid for it. That would have been through the low, and also if you apply under the low income scheme, you get a certificate that lasts for 12 months. So actually,
free access.
Sorry,
for free access.
Yes. So, okay. Like there is if you are somewhere around and about the thresholds, there is an argument to be made that maybe you might be better off applying for the HC1. So you've got a 12-year period, so there's no issue with regards to whether you might be around the threshold, so you're fully eligible for it all the time. Yeah.
As long as I'm comfortable that there is a safety net for those who are not automatically.
Yeah, there's no sense that this is taking anybody. This is not reducing the eligibility. It's reintroducing an automatic passporting benefit. The automatic system for 83% we estimate. So it's not none of this touches the overall eligibility. It is merely the mechanism by which allowing people that they don't have to fill in any form for getting that.
Okay, thank you, and sorry for the confusion, but I think
and also when it comes to it, like if you go to your dentist or your optician, you're basically, your eligibility is, this goes out, tells people what they're eligibility for, and they say to the optician or dentist that they're eligible for. It's not a very complicated process outside of that.
Thank you, Danny.
Thank you. I think you've maybe just touched on what I was going to ask there. So this population that you're talking about who will lose the automatic passporting, round about 30,000 people, is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. But they've all. What I would say is actually they've already many of those have already lost the automatic passporting benefit, because anybody that has now moved on to universal credit, and that's quite a considerable percentage of it, they have already lost the automatic passporting benefit at the moment. So really, this is a situation of reintroducing automatic passporting for people that have lost it, rather than
or 82% of
82% of them.
Okay, so there is a population, 18% of those people
that who have lost it, that will not gain it back
unless they reapply, unless they apply
to the low income scheme. Yes,
to the low income scheme. Will they be told? Will they be informed that they have to do that?
Well, that is the information out there at the moment for people that have moved on to universal credit. Now, I admit that perhaps the communications from DFC may not be as clear. But one would hope that as we're letting more people know about this change, then that will reinforce the change that those that aren't, what process they have to. If they don't meet the thresholds, then this is the process they will have to follow.
Will they specifically be told, you're in this population, you're in this subset of the population that isn't automatically being passported, and in order to...
I don't think there's... I don't know if Department of Communities has the ability to tell people, because my understanding of universal credit, like, it can goes up and down, go up month to month, up and down month to month. So I don't know whether or not if you're one side of a threshold, whereas every month you get a letter to say, or a notification to say, now you're in the threshold, now you're not in the threshold. Because that broadly will be the more difficult part of it would be. You wouldn't necessarily, but especially as, whether somebody's overall eligible because of the overall income that they're making is in sort of, if you're above those thresholds automatically, and you might be eligible, I don't know if the system will be able to automatically say, you're not under the thresholds, but if you apply to this manual process, you would be eligible. I don't know if the system would ever. I don't know if DFC system would be able to do that.
These people would expect to have the free dentistry and free eye checks and things like that because they've had it for years. Is that correct?
Those are they're on legacy benefits,
and now they've been passported over
to universal credit,
and there will be this small subset who will not be eligible.
Yes,
and they're not going to be told that they have to apply.
So they won't know until they go to the dentist.
So they won't know until they go to the dentist.
If I could come in, so those who have gone from legacy benefits, income support or whatever, onto universal credit, none of them knew whether they'd be eligible. That was the problem. And so they pitched up at their dentist or optometrist and says, I'm eligible. And they maybe weren't. And so they either said, taking up your point, they either says, well, come in, we'll treat you, we'll see you today, but you might not be eligible. Or here's the form, go away and fill it up. So 82% of those now don't have to go through that rigmarole. Some of those that are over the threshold will have to go through, if they want to, low income. So I'm here to give professional advice to the policy function, and it's been a nightmare, both for patients and for practices. They don't know. So now the vast majority of people will know that they're eligible. Those who are not and say, well, that's not very fair. Well, you're not out the door yet. Here's a complicated form. And it has made an impact on what we're trying to, so it is demand led, but what we're trying to do is encourage uptake of services for prevention, early intervention, etc. And this has been a challenge. So for me, it's a positive that the 82% will be automatically passported. They'll know that they're eligible for this access to treatments and help towards. Those who are not, the door isn't shut on them, but there will be thresholds.
So I've been online to answer some of these questions as well. So it's saying you can apply online and it's 20 minutes, and in terms of Noel's question, you can apply for a refund at the same time as you're making the application. So, sorry, Danny, have you finished?
Yeah, I'm just a bit concerned that there are people who won't be told that they don't qualify. That kind of sits on well with me.
Told if they do.
I suppose, like, I'm hesitant to say they absolutely will be told, but because the Department for Communities is responsible for the communications with, like, we don't have access to people that are on universal credit, and
They do.
They do. So we are in communication with them about all the changes, and believe me, they, you know, and so we will be flagging, I suppose, this up again, and perhaps, and hopefully through that will mean that something could go out to them through their systems.
I would have thought too, I mean, as well as that issue, because people should be informed, but, you know, a poster in a dental surgery or an optician's explaining, are you entitled to free dentistry or free, and here's the threshold, I think that would be very useful too, moving forward.
Well, that's within our gift, and that's what we were looking to do.
Okay, thank you. Diane?
Right. I don't actually know where to start here. It seems that we're trying to, and first of all, I really do welcome the fact that we are thinking about this passporting, because this has been an issue for really too long, with very complex forms for sometimes elderly people to fill in, and it has been difficult. So I really do welcome that. But it seems to me what you're saying is that we're trying to simplify a situation, but it will be just as complicated for a significant portion of people. Do you know what that portion of people are? So do we have numbers that 18% are that may be eligible but might not be eligible, but won't be definitely passported over?
That may be eligible but would not be passported over. We said that was about 18%. So the 82% were approximately 264,000.
It's about
So 26,000, about 26,000 people that are not automatic. Hold on, sorry.
It's about 57,000.
57,000, yeah.
About 50. So it's still a significant number of people for whom this proposed solution won't provide a solution. I'm right, Anne?
Well, but they'll have to apply.
Well, it might, but they'll have to apply. They don't know. It might. And is that because you're applying the GB thresholds? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And how do we reach those people? I do accept that folks in this category, almost 60,000 of them, will actually think that, hey, this is a little bit unfair, you know. How do we reach them? How do we talk to them? How do we, otherwise you sore tooth, you go to the dentist, you discover, gosh, I'm not automatically passported it, despite the fact that 200,000 odd are, but it might be eligible for help. And how do we get to those people?
We wouldn't know who they were because the communities will, but unfortunately, as Noel was saying, the thresholds go up and down on a monthly basis.
Yeah.
And that maybe not so important in an episodic area of care. For eye care, you go for a sight test, you're eligible at that time, you're not. In dental, the treatment could start in month 1 and finish in month 8, and they might fall in and out of thresholds in between those times. So what we do, well, we have strategies to try and, these are marginalised people, as you allude to, and these are people that might struggle to access services generally. And so we have, in eye care, we have a prevention, early intervention work stream that looks and sees how can we message, how we can get message out to people about their eligibility. Now we can't tell them whether they'll be above or below the threshold, because that's a personal thing to their financial circumstance. But we just need to get our messaging right. The problem is we don't know who they are. Communities do. We don't until they present.
And what has your communication with the Department of Communities shown you?
Well,
I'm just loath to launch a scheme that then throws up a dozen other problems of who isn't eligible, how do we tell people they're eligible, without having a kind of a holistic way of moving it forward. I mean, I do think it is a good thing. It is a good thing. I'm not I'm not taking anything away from that, but I'm just saying that it's really difficult for those people who won't know, will have to test the system. The system is complex, the form is long, and how do we get that information out? I would just like to know a little bit more from the department, in a joined up way, how that works. That's really my question.
I mean, just on the back of Dan, so I mean, I'm trying to summarise this because I think I have it clear, and then somebody asks a question and then I'm befuddled again. So we all welcome the fact that there is now movement to include 82% of people who currently aren't passported to passport. So we're all concerned about, because as you rightly say, Raymond, we're talking about very marginalised people here. We want to ensure everybody who's entitled to free healthcare gets it, and we also, because we want to make sure people are getting healthcare, and we don't want cost to be a prohibitive factor. So am I right, Noel, in what you perhaps said earlier? So this is what we're doing. 82% are getting it, but you, the department, are continuing to work with colleagues in Britain to try and address the level issue to see if there's something that we can maybe bring at a later stage here that will deal with those other 18%. And in the meantime, we're going to have messaging and communication to ensure that those 18% are aware of the fact that they are entitled to it, even though they may have to apply. Is that
well, we have engaged across with colleagues in Scotland, Wales, and in England about that threshold and what a potential new threshold would be. And obviously, when it's done on that level, it's much easier for us to get access to the data. Because ultimately, even DFC only has some of the data, has to come through DWP themselves. And the aim with that is to come up with a new formula for setting thresholds, because that threshold, the way that threshold was set, can't be replicated. It's based on a fixed point in time. It's not based on something that what is more common now. It would be something that like multiplication of either the national minimum wage or something along those lines, or something that it would potentially automatically change.
So with a system, we're moving to a system that is improving it, but not perfect.
No, it will be much easier once the universal credit is made an automatic passporting benefit. It'll be much easier in future to change the thresholds. That's really the thing. That the bigger issue is making universal credit an automatic passport at some point, and the thresholds are a much easier thing then, because there's less of a policy. There's a much easier thing to do something about changing those and move forward.
Yeah, I think. Sorry, Linda, I didn't see your hand there. So, I mean, I think the view of this committee is that we want you to speedily work with that next phase. So we're dealing with that there. Linda.
You've literally just covered it, Chair. I think that's. I mean, this is good news for those that will be covered, and I agree with Jan. It's not so simple for those that won't, but we need to get moving, particularly given that very last sentence that has been said, that it will be easier to move the thresholds. That this is the difficult part. We need to deal with the difficult part in order to get to the easier part. I think it's important that we move this on.
Okay, so I just have one last question before you see, in terms of the date. So I mean, when I was reading that, it said that it was implemented on the 31st of August, which is obviously passed. So I mean, and what is the time frame for when will this?
No, well, our aim will be once you've committed your scrutiny responsibility and give us the approval to lay the legislation. It'll be the standard 30 days after that. So at the moment, we would, I suppose, depending on at some point mid to late October at the moment.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much. So, members, are we, given all of what we've said, are we content with the merits of the policy and that the statutory rule be made? Sorry, I maybe should have done that before the officials left. No. So. Noah?
I'm not completely content, but I understand that we have to move forward with it because there are too many people not automatically receiving their free treatment, but I do think that there is a gap, and that volume of 57,000 people is that's a large number of people, and I think that we should maybe do a little bit of work in terms of communicating to the department or even and the committee, the communities committee too, perhaps to ask specifically about what they're doing with regarding 57,000 people who will not be automatically entitled, but likely will be entitled, but they just have to do a little bit of work themselves.
I mean, I would go along with it. I think we should accept the SL1 today, but we should certainly write to both departments expressing kind of our concern and urging them to close the gap. People content?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. So, item number 7 then, oral briefing on redesign of serious adverse impact procedure. Can I refer members to the following papers? Tab 7, page 72, and welcome departmental officials.
Can I ask, this isn't the original briefing we were supposed to get? It says or not, so I'm a bit confused as to what we're...
So I'm going to welcome Professor Lourda Geoghegan, Deputy Chief Medical Officer, and Kieran McAteer, Director of Quality, Safety and Improvement. So I'm going to hand over to yourselves just to make some brief opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll keep the opening remarks brief and then happy to take questions. So thank you for the opportunity to attend and brief you in relation to the work that is ongoing to redesign the approach to how we learn from serious adverse incidents. I'm joined by Kieran McAteer, who's Director of Safety and Quality and Improvement in the Department. Chair, we were to be joined by Dr. Seamus O'Reilly, but he's indisposed because he's unwell, so sends his apologies. He's had to withdraw. So we have provided some written material just in advance of today's meeting, and we're happy to answer any questions on that, and hopefully you found that useful. So I think the purpose of today is to update you, Chair and members, on the consultation that we have had open earlier this year around consultation for the 4 key strategic documents which will oversee and govern the system in terms of learning when things go wrong. And that was a framework, a set of standards and 2 sets of engagement principles. We have previously updated on the objectives of this work and other various strands, and we're happy to talk about that if it would be helpful. I just wanted to make a couple of points before we get into questions, Chair. So the first thing to say is that, and we spoke about this I think when we attended previously, we've sought to take a very inclusive approach to development of the overall strategic approach and the documents that went out for consultation. We've engaged very extensively with HSE staff, but particularly with people with lived experience, patients, service users, family members and carers, and this has been central to the approach overall. I'll say a couple of words in a minute about our extended timeline. We had hoped to consult at the end of 24, but it actually was early 2025. And partially that was influenced by the degree of engagement we were doing with families, people with lived experience and various parts of the health and social care system. So the public consultation launched on the 10th of March and it extended to the 20th of June. So it was a total of 15 weeks. We actually extended the engagement period. We had intended to close a number of weeks earlier, but there were requests from a number of parties to extend, and so we extended it, and it was a total of 15 weeks. So I mentioned we had intended when we came before, we had mentioned that we'd intended to consult and open the consultation at the end or in autumn 2024. That timeline was pushed out with Minister's agreement because we were in the middle of a very detailed and complex engagement, as we talked about the last time, with family members, with carers, with people with lived experience, and also, crucially, with staff across the HSE. And at the time, we also took the opportunity to engage with boards, chairs and boards of all of the trusts and a number of the arm's length bodies. So we are happy to describe what we did as part of the consultation. The consultation is closed. We've received 69 formal responses. They're a mixture of responses from individuals and from organisations, and they contain quantitative and qualitative data. There is a lot of very rich data and information in the responses, and that's really helpful because that's the consultation was specifically set up for that. So it is taking time to work through and go through what we got as part of the responses, and Kieran will be able to update in terms of colleagues in the policy team going through that. There's a detailed narrative to add to the experiences that we already had from across the system, and that is actually really helpful to us. So we had originally intended to publish with Ministers' Agreement the consultation analysis in September. It now looks like it will be October when we publish that, subject to Ministers' Agreement. And I've mentioned a couple of factors that have influenced that delay. One was the extension of the timeline for our consultation, and the other is particularly the detail that we have coming through in the consultation that we need to take time to go through and make sure it's reflected in the final strategic products. The other thing to highlight is the policy team is a small policy team, and it's also the policy team that's working with the HSE in terms of updating and reshaping the complaints policy, working in collaboration with NIPSO. So there's a bit about timing both for the policy team and also for the health and social care system in terms of the work. So in conclusion, we have set out the next steps, but very happy to answer any questions you have about the next steps in this process. Subject to Ministers' Agreement, we would be working to publish the consultation response in November. And then once that is published, that then informs the finalised strategic products in the context of the framework, the standards and the engagement principles. And subject to Ministers' Agreement, we would ask him to endorse those for use across the system, and then all organisations to use those. That's the strategic governing approach, which we have not had set out before previously. And then that then triggers a very concerted transition programme once they have been accepted for use across the health and social care system.
So, thank you very much. In terms of your last point, so if the Minister outlines the consultation in November, how long are those other processes that you have just at the very end of your presentation? How long does that take? Like, when will we see changes?
I'll give it to you maybe in terms of...
So I think as Lourda said, we will publish the consultation outcome in November. That will then hopefully, subject to the Ministers' Agreement, that will allow us to update and finalise the strategic framework that Lourda has outlined. So the framework for the new process, the standards that will govern the new process, and also the principles for engagement with all of those affected by an incident, so our service users, families, carers, and also all of our staff. That will then trigger, I think, so we will seek to finalise and publish those before the end of the year. So we will see those products published by the end of the year, that's our intention. And that will then signal a period of transition before they are implemented in full. We will set out, we don't have all of the detail in terms of that transition plan and in terms of the project structures for the transition period. It will have a number of core themes, so focusing on system readiness, focusing on education and training, finalising the oversight and governance arrangements, and sort of, I suppose in simple terms, currently all of the supporting governance and processes and arrangements are geared towards the current SAI process, which, as members will know, is complex and broad and deep. We need to repurpose a lot of that supporting infrastructure so that at the end of the transition period, it's then supporting the new framework, which, as Lourda has outlined, is a significant shift in terms of the way we do things, in terms of the supporting culture, in terms of how reviews are delivered, and also in terms of, importantly, the oversight and the governance arrangements, both at trust level and also at regional level with our colleagues in SPPG, PHA and others.
Okay, and I mean, obviously there's now a delay in the process, and you've clearly outlined why. And I mean, from our point of view, well, from my point of view, I think it's important that we get the right process at the end. So that's the most important thing. But just given what you're saying there, Kieran, about the significant shift, so like, are there any measures that the department are doing in the interim when you have identified something that very clearly needs and shouldn't have to wait until? I mean, are there interim measures and interim changes that you are implementing? Yes.
By nature of the fact that we've been engaging in such a detailed way over the course of the last 18 to 24 months, there's lots of things happening which will help the system reorientate once because we don't see the transition period, which will begin immediately once the products are launched. That's not kind of an all or nothing. That's going to be continual work in progress. So, for instance, in our last round of meetings with boards, with chairs and boards, we saw a significant shift from when we'd had the previous round of discussions 12 months earlier. So all boards and trusts have a non-executive director identified as lead. They are strengthening their oversight and governance arrangements. Members will probably be aware there are backlogs in doing reviews in some of the currently identified serious adverse incidents. We'd had very robust discussions on the previous occasion with boards when we go back this time, which was the end of last year, improvements across those delays. Many boards have new non-executive members and they are receiving training. So there's lots of things going on, all of which will help once we get into the transition piece. It's not a very static, we move from where we were last month to this month. We do see improvements in the trusts in terms of delivery of learning when something has gone wrong. I would say we were concerned about the backlogs for reviews in the system. We are seeing improvement in that now, and that's very encouraging. You'll be aware there is a support and intervention framework which SPPG oversee and run, and some trusts had input from that because of some of the delays in getting their reviews done. So we're seeing both an improvement in process and an upskilling and support in terms of the people who need and will be delivering on the new arrangements.
And then lastly for me, the Minister's told us he's bringing forward a duty of candor bill. Do we have a timeline for that, and how will that process feed into this process?
Now, there are a number of strategic alignments, and that's one. The being open framework is another. I don't lead on the duty of candor. I don't have the direct timeline.
There's no definite time frame as yet, Chair. The Minister has set out in the reset plan a commitment to an organisational duty of candor, and also set out that officials continue to engage with the Public Accountability Bill that's been brought forward in Westminster. I expect we may hear something pretty soon, but I just don't have any definitive timeframes, and I don't have anything further this time, Chair, that I think I can say in public forum.
Given the nature of an election in 2 years and the mandate ending, we would need to hear something on it soon. Nuala?
You mean we would hear about the Hillsborough law, I assume it is you're talking about, soon, or the duty of candor bill? I know that there was some rumblings in Westminster that there may be something new soon, like very soon, but are you talking about that or about duty of candor?
So I think both are related. I think the Minister has said it in the reset plan that we will confirm the policy position both in relation to organisational duty of candor and individual duty of candor. So the organisational duty of candor could be a standalone piece, but the Public Accountability Bill will deal with, as members may be aware, individual duty of candor, on all public officials, all public authorities. So that's the separation.
And I think that is very positive, that all public servants should have the duty of candor. It's not just about health officials, and I think and many of us have been quite clear that it isn't just about health officials, a duty of candor. I've just come from a policing board meeting in which we were discussing a duty of candor on officers too, so I think it's important as well, and then elected representatives. But in the meantime, though, despite the delays, there's the being open framework, people are still going through the SAI procedure, and funding or resource has been reduced for level 3 SAIs. We have been made aware of by trusts before the process had actually started. So I'm not sure if that is a trust by trust decision or any reasoning behind that at all, and if that's something as a department that you can look into, because in order for investigations to be carried out to its fullest, you can't reduce either its remit or its resource before it actually begins. And then another question, I'll just give you it now, is confidence in the transition to the new procedure is important, and we outlined the consultation with families and people affected, but we all get to our constituency offices constantly about dissatisfaction with the SAI procedure and about trusts not enabling that sit down with families affected, rather than the incident itself. How can we be confident and ensure that that will be a key part of it, and that we can actually ensure accountability that each stage of the process has been followed?
I think they're really both. That's the really important question, and it's a key part of the redesign. Just on your earlier point around the funding available around level 3, I certainly haven't heard, and I don't think that we're aware of a notion being articulated that there would be reduction in funding for level 3 incidents. I certainly haven't heard that. I mean, I think where we would be coming is from first principles. If you take it, let's say over the course of 12 months we get 600 odd serious adverse incidents a year, you'll have probably 10 to 15% of those in the more complex end, and many of those will be a more detailed and in-depth complex review. And we would be coming from the approach just as you've outlined, which is an incident or something has happened. It needs a review, and then you look at constructing what the appropriate review team is. That's kind of, we'll be coming from the front end. I certainly wasn't aware of anything which would indicate that there's a decision that resource for a more complex review as needed wouldn't be provided. I haven't ever experienced that myself, I have to say. The other thing I just think to bear in mind about resources, as is resource is very constrained and gets more constrained, the potential for things to happen increases. That's particularly what we worry about in terms of the resourcing impact. But I haven't come across any experience.
And so funding isn't allocated, on each individual SAI, so that's not how it works.
No,
and it wouldn't be, and nothing would be, resource wouldn't be reduced midway through investigations or anything. Now,
we're talking about this from I suppose a departmental perspective, but I certainly have not come across experiences in the healthcare delivery system where people would say we can't continue this because we don't resource it. I certainly have come across where people would say we've done a number of reviews, we feel we've looked at this to the extent to which we looked at, therefore we don't think something else is warranted. And that's what we would like to see from first principles as opposed to a funding decision influencing it. Yeah. Confidence in the transition piece, do you want to?
Yeah, so I think that's, in terms of confidence from the transition piece, I think the question was around how can we be assured that those involved are compassionately engaged, kept informed, involved in line with their wishes. So that level of involvement and the assurance around that level of involvement is very much something we've heard from day one, from all of our engagements, indeed derived from the HRD inquiry, derived from the RQA report, and the involvement discussions we have had and the co-production discussions we have had with families, patients and service users. So we absolutely have a focus on that in the framework. We absolutely have a core theme in the standards, and indeed we have co-designed a set of guiding principles in terms of how we engage with families, service users and all those affected. So there are very definitive standards in terms of the level of engagement. It should be compassionate, it should be open, using appropriate language. If something has gone wrong, we should offer an apology where that's appropriate. Keep families involved in the incident review in line with their wishes, discuss the terms of reference. So lots of granular detail in terms of how that should be done. In terms of how we can be assured then that is happening in practice, it's the same with all of the different elements of the framework. We are rebalancing and reorientating a lot of the governance and oversight and assurance. So the trusts and trust boards in particular need to have systems and assurance systems in place that all elements of the framework are being taken forward in all of the reviews, and those must be robust, they must be tested, and they must be designed and operating well in practice. So we have those internal assurance mechanisms, and some of that might mean peer review of how reviews have been handled. It might mean sort of audit and records of how the review and the decision making has been documented and shared with families. And then, in addition to that internal governance, we're also looking at repurposing and remodelling the regional oversight function, so that our colleagues in SPPG and PHA will have a system assurance function. So looking at organisational systems, making sure they have plans in place, policies in place, and supporting governance arrangements to be assured up to board level that all of the right activity in line with the framework is happening. So the framework has a core focus on families and patients and compassionate engagement, and then the assurance arrangements will be sort of rebalanced and repurposed to ensure that that's happening in practice.
I think the proof will be in
Yes, yes,
the outcome of it, so we look forward to it. Yeah.
I suppose just to also add to that, as part of the working group we've had at a regional level to get to these products, we directly recruited people with lived experience in to work with us, which was really valuable, really, really valuable. Our intention is to ask those people to continue to work across the piece. And so while as part of extant governing arrangements in an organisation and regionally, we want to see all these things happening, our transition arrangements also will include people with lived experience. And we rely on them both to bring their experience but also to prompt and continually look to make sure that what is expected to happen is happening.
Thanks. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the update. I'm particularly glad to hear that you've been working with people who have lived experience, and this is a particularly interesting and relevant piece for me because I actually did, with constituents, attend an SAI meeting on Friday. And I thought when I was attending an SAI meeting that the actual SAI report would be very particular to that individual. In fact, about 70% of the report was actually generic stuff. Anybody could have written it and could have applied to anybody. And we had to ask at the meeting for relevant details of that person to be inserted into the SAI report. So the sooner we get change, the better. Because if I had been coming out and it had been my SAI report into a very serious issue, I would have gone home and been utterly, utterly devastated. And Lourda, I know this, that it is not the intention, but I thought it was a really poor, really, really poor into a really serious incident. And I'll be asking for a meeting with yourself and Michael around this. A really poor response to a very, very serious issue. I haven't spoken to that young couple since, but I do intend to speak to them before the week's out. I wanted to give them some space. But we just shouldn't be having reports that are such poor quality and that leave people so devastated, where they're having to ask for relevant details to be inserted, despite the fact that they'd talked to the people who were going to write the report. So consultation, information, keeping patients at the real core of this. That is what I'll be looking for in this, having gone through that. And this wasn't me personally, but I just thought it was really, really poor. In fact, devastatingly poor. So I wanted to put that in the record. I think that for that family was really not a good experience at all, and didn't resolve anything much, is the honest truth. So I'm looking, when I see a framework, I'm looking to see that things that have people at its core, and those people who've been harmed at its core, people who can really move that forward. And that's one of the things that I'll be looking for. I really haven't said all that. There's sort of a few areas that I really wanted to know about. You talked about a backlog of SAIs. Do we know what the backlog is? How many cases does that? How long have those cases been in the system? And can you provide us with figures around that backlog? Because my experience with the people I've dealt with SAIs is the longer that this goes on, the more trauma and harm. And these patients have already been harmed, but the more trauma and harm is involved. So, do you have figures on that backlog?
I suppose first of all, to say on your first comment, very happy to engage offline in relation to
okay.
Feedback and experience and your commentary on that particular case. So as part of the current function, SPPG, as part of their general performance management function, work across the system with all trust to see where they are in terms of their adverse incidents and their reviews ongoing, reviews open, reviews completing. So I don't directly have the figures with me now, but there are figures that we certainly can get and share with you afterwards.
Well, it would be very, very useful if we knew that.
Yes.
Because the longer, I mean, it seems to me that we will have quite a bit of time before we actually transfer to any new system. And the longer that we trundle along with all of these in the system but not being dealt with, I mean, I think that's just the worst for everybody. So I think that's important.
Yeah, we'll certainly follow up with that for committee members. Also to say to you, part of the reason for the reshaping is to try and get into a much more proportionate place, and to try and move out of a very process-driven piece, which by its nature creates backlog. And so some of this is about applying proportionality and making sure that there's time and space for the complex incidents that need independence, need good skill, need good expertise in terms of a good, robust assessment for what has gone on. So it is important that we get the thing reshaped in order to get out of a highly process-driven piece. And then also just to agree with you in terms of timeliness. Complex processes that extend on absolutely do nothing to help patients or family members, and do nothing to help staff members involved in when things go wrong either.
And some of
so I think your
the
points are well
SAIs
made.
that I've been involved in have gone on for years. And that's, it's just not acceptable. It means a harmful situation becomes ever more harmful and ever more traumatic. And, you know, I do want to really, really stress that. And I really want to stress the involvement of people and people being listened to. And not this generic pile of bump that is in some of them, but actual addressing the core issue of the harm and what went wrong. So my next question is, I have been approached by a number of the families from Muckamore who have had serious adverse incidents investigated, but not, and are finding it incredibly difficult. And I think some have been writing to the Belfast Trust for maybe 2 years to get details of adverse incidents that they believe may and could have been escalated, but remain as adverse, but they can't get the details of those incidents. I have a letter from the Trust which says, well, this is a legal process and we can't possibly allow these people to have this information. Can someone come back to this committee and explain why they can't get information on their loved ones? Is it a capacity issue? Because we know that by definition that there is a capacity issue in relation to Muckamore. But it seems to me that if my son or my daughter was in Muckamore and with all of had been going on, and I wanted to find out all of the adverse incidents, I imagine that information should be available to me. And it clearly isn't. So that's my other point.
I'm not aware of the specific details.
But I want to make the point. I've written to the Trust to have a letter which is back, but I want to make the point that this is something that also needs to be looked at an overall strategic level. Why can people not get information on their loved ones when they believe that harm has been done?
They were here previously, and
There is a court case at the minute, and I believe that the department or the trust, Belfast Trust, I think, is representing, and that there should be a change to that because they're now.
But like, I think what we need again, I'm going back to the point about re-traumatizing people over and over again by the late delay. And I suppose the other thing I wanted to ask about, you talked about SPPG having a regional oversight function in relation to SIIs. Is that independent enough for an SII process? Or should we have an independent process that looks at SIIs? Because sometimes when I've talked to people who've been through an SII process, it almost has felt like the trust marking its own homework.
So I think on the independence piece, if you're happy, so I think there are a couple of really important considerations in the independent piece. So if we start off at the beginning, if we let's say we get about 600-ish SIIs a year, and we will move and change terminology as well, but let's say 10 to 15% of those are in the complex world, and they are the ones that really need very skilled expertise, space and time, and independence. And part of the work that this reshaping we want to do is to actually enhance the focus, strategically have set out the commitment to independence, and then support across the entirety of the piece around independence. It wouldn't be feasible to have something which is independence across every single large number of, because you go from adverse to serious adverse, but the ones that are in the complex world, which are generally about 10 to 15%, absolutely need independence.
And how will you provide that? Because it doesn't seem to me that SPPG will be independent. How will you provide that independence of that SAI process?
So there's a numbers of aspects to it, okay? Yeah. They range from the initial assessment from the trust that something has happened and that the review is going to need an independent chair, independent input, and a variety of other skills. In that regard, we are considering things such as how do we support other parts of HSC to provide some independent people with skills? How do we potentially support a panel of people at the region who are independent, who would have good skills, often to support the chairing and the investigative bit? You will be aware that some of the independent reviews that are done have inputs from Royal Colleges and other national expert bodies. So there's a range of ways that we will support and consider supporting that in the ones that really need them. So that's part of doing the review. There also is, in my view, building in consideration to the independence for the assurance system. Okay, so that's both at trust board level, but it's also at the regional level. And when we set out an assurance framework across the entirety of the piece, we certainly will give consideration as to how you would build in some independence to the regional function as well. So I don't think it's a purist, you have to have independent review of everything. It's about making sure that you have independence built in at all the various levels of the ones that need it.
Well, I'll be really interested in monitoring how that works, because if I'd been involved in an incident, and thank the Lord I haven't been, but if I'd been involved, I'd be really, really wary of a trust doing its own report on an SAI without a degree of independence. And given that I just so recently actually went through the process with the family, I don't know that I would have a lot of confidence that that's in the current system, and that's why I'd really like the backlog figures, and I'd really like some assurance that we're really moving towards real positive change on this issue. We did have a meeting on a Tuesday, I think, with some of the folks who were involved in SII, and like those folks could hardly talk about their experience. It was so difficult. And I'm acutely aware that if this drags on, I mean, do we have any idea about what the average length of time an SII takes?
We do. We have that, and SPPG will have that information.
It might be useful to know as well.
I don't have the exact figures in front of me today, but I do know that we have seen very good improvements in that in recent times. Partially, the difficulty with this...
Not, I hope, at the expense of the quality
well,
of the SAI.
I was just going to say that part of the challenge in all of this is it has to live in the complexity of the healthcare system that health and social care system we're currently working in. We're not starting from scratch, we're starting with the process which is already has gotten very process orientated, and we need to loosen that up. But in loosening that up, we need to make sure that the resources and the skills are redirected into where they really need to be in the complex incidents, because they are the ones that need the time and the independence. And we also have met a lot of staff, patients, family members, both as departmental officials, but also administer, who are really impacted. We've also met staff members who are really impacted years down the line. So that's the extreme end of when things go really wrong. That's not all of them, but that is a subset. And partially what this work is focused on is trying to get a much better approach to that subset that are very complex.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Orlia.
Thank you, Kieran and Lourda. So, just to go back to, in your opening remarks, you had spoke about how valuable the responses that you have received, how valuable they have been in terms of this piece of work. And the first question, well, it might seem like a simple one, but it's what assurances can you give at this stage that that value that you have got from those consultation responses, especially those individual ones that have came from families and patients, and indeed, as you mentioned, their staff, but how those will directly shape this new piece of work, so it's even given people at this stage. I know the consultation is just closed and you're still working on the responses, but even that message is going out to the public who didn't respond, that their responses will shape this new piece of work. Because I think that's really important just for people even to have the trust in the consultation process. And, as Diane was saying there, the people that we've met and that we deal with in our constituency offices who have been through this process, and indeed people I'm sure you have met as well, they've already went through really difficult times and experiences to get to the stage of having to go through an SAI process. So I just think it's amazing then the fact that those families, individuals who have taken the time to give their feedback, it can't be easy. So it's just, again, that reassurance that they're listened to and it is going to shape this piece of work. And in the briefing paper around the current position and the proposed next steps, so you had mentioned that so yes, by the end of October then you'll have compiled the consultation responses. And then in terms of, so the consultation response report will be published in November. And then it mentioned around the work that will be undertaken in collaboration with the health and social care system and individuals with lived experience. And then you will bring the final proposals to the Minister. So I'm just wondering, in that period where you have compiled the consultation responses and then you are going to go through that process of collaborating with the system, with people with lived experience before you bring your final proposal to the Minister, when you talk about the individuals with lived experience, is that the 3 families that you've already been working with that you alluded to earlier? Or is there scope? Because again, I'm just thinking of the informal session that we done as a health committee a number of months ago, and we have met with families that I know aren't involved in that process, and I know that actually one of those families, on the back of your last presentation at the health committee, one of those families that reached out to Michael around joining that group with lived experience, but they were declined. So basically because the process was already set up, which is fair enough, and the family were directed to the consultation process. So it's really around, I would certainly like us as a health committee to go back even informally to that group of families that we met and that we spent time with, even to go over the consultation response report, if that is going to be published in November. So we're ensuring that come the final proposals when they're going to the Minister, that people genuinely feel listened to.
Yeah. So we'll pick up on both of those. I think one bit's about forward plan and how we continue to make sure we have people inputting the consultation responses. Do you want to maybe just say a bit about that and shaping the future work?
Sure. So in terms of the process going forward, it will principally be, I think, around the 3 members that we have on our structures already. I think it is important to say that we, in our view, did have an extensive co-production, involvement, engagement piece in the development of the proposals. So we had the open competition to recruit the 3 members, and they have had a fantastic contribution to all of the products. I think it was 29 people applied for that in the first instance. We have engaged and kept engaged with the others who weren't invited to come along. We have also engaged with the PCC engagement platform. I think that has 5 members. We have met with them a number of times. We have received a lot of detailed written submissions and personal vignettes, which have been extremely helpful in terms of informing our analysis and our considerations. And again, we had an event during the consultation phase hosted by the PCC and inviting service users, family members and those with lived experience. And that process with families and service users with lived experience is set in the wider programme of engagement and involvement and co-production that we've undertaken with staff, with trust boards, with other stakeholders with an interest in the current process of the PSNI, the Coroner's Office, Ombudsman's Office, the Victims Commissioner Designate, a significant period of engagement, and we believe we have done our best to reflect all of that input and engagement in the consultation proposals. And we have gone one step further, I think, than the other nations, in that we have opened the learning, this incident learning review system open to public consultation. I don't think the other UK nations have done that when looking at their proposals recently. So we have had that open, inclusive consultation as well. So we have had, we feel, a significant involvement piece to date. We will certainly look at how we can involve going forward now. We will absolutely be bringing it back to our existing family members, those representing family members, but we will look at what we can do further in terms of sort of finalising those proposals, mindful of the extensive piece that we've done so far.
Can I just ask, Kieran, because I'm just thinking as you were speaking, before you bring the final proposals to the Minister, I'm thinking even again about the input of NIPSO, because I know they deal with families and when things have broke down or when families don't find a resolution, through the process with the Health Trust. So I know then NIPSO would be dealing obviously with a lot of those families and individuals, who have passed the point of, being able to, so obviously I'm sure their input has been, very helpful to you as well, but will they be involved right up to the point of before the final proposals are made, or has that been considered? Or?
We have received a response from NIPSO to the consultation, and we have met recently actually with the Ombudsman and with the Permanent Secretary, and I think they are absolutely broadly aligned with the direction of travel that we're trying to achieve. Yep. They have provided some helpful and constructive feedback on other elements that we will need to look at. If I'm being honest, we wouldn't ordinarily go back out to all of the various stakeholders who have already contributed. We'll take their views on board as a result of the consultation. But if there's anything in particular that we feel we need to re-engage, we can do that. Yeah. But having received the consultation report, as I say, and I don't want to misrepresent because I'm not over all of the detail, they are in broad alignment with the strategic intent of the review. Some things that they have fed back that we'll need to take consideration of as part of our overarching consultation. That's
great. I think the other thing I would add is this is really an ongoing piece. Yep. So for instance, NIPSO had a public event, I'm going to say some stage 2024, maybe March or April, first half of 2024. They wanted to really focus on learning when things go wrong. So we were invited to do a session as part of that whole public day, which was a workshop session which we were delighted to attend, participate, support our Minister, but also Kieran and I hosted a workshop. So we were hearing from both the NIPSO staff but also the people that they're engaging with. Yeah. So I don't think we will change from continuing to engage in all those 4 as we go along, because there's a cultural piece behind this. The only way you get the change is to continue to have the conversation, engage with people all the time. Yeah. So it's not a case that we've done all this, we won't be doing any more. Yeah. I think what is important is this is the first time that we will have a strategic governing set of documents. These are the principles we all sign up to. these are the standards, and the standards set out what's expected, what the evidence is, and what the outcome should be. And then the sets of principles for engagement. It's the first time we have that strategically set out, so everybody knows that is what we're working to. And then it's about realigning all the bits underneath, the education and training, the assurance bit, the data, the processes, to make sure that everybody's going in the same direction. And so because it's a realignment of what's currently happening, that just makes it a little bit more complicated than bringing in something from new.
I think if I can add just quickly, Chair, in terms of the NIPSO, their model complaints handling procedure, and the new framework that we are bringing forward, there is natural alignments between the two in terms of compassionate engagement, in terms of sort of earlier resolution where that's appropriate to the complaint that's raised, or the incidents on the review, to minimise any of that compounded harm and the difficulty. So there are absolutely natural alignments in terms of what both are designed to achieve.
Yep, of course. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Oh, Danny.
Yep, Chair, thank you. Quite a lot. We've got through quite a lot there. I wanted to pick up on something Diane had said. I was going to ask similarly about the numbers and the length of the backlogs. You weren't able to give that figure today, and I think you've committed to provide that to the committee.
That, yes, we will. Yeah.
Could that be broken down into trust areas? I'm interested to see if you're aware of any disparity between trusts in this. Is there anything you can...
Off the top of my head, I don't have the data in my head, so I'm not sure what level it comes down to, but we'll certainly engage with SPPG colleagues and see what can be provided following the meeting.
So if we could get the numbers of backlogs and the length of those backlogs and have it broken down into trust areas as well, I think that would be useful for us to be able to see. I've met with families who have been through this process, and I'm aware of this process from previous career. Can I ask just something I have heard? I know this process is incredibly stressful and there are lots of delays, and that in itself does affect the people who are involved in it, the people who are complainants. Are SAI reports, are they shared before completion? Are they shared with the trusts for any feedback before they're published, before they're completed? So the investigation, does that go back to the trust then, before completion of the process?
So, to the best of my knowledge, the way the report piece works, and this again is for the ones on the more complex end, okay, because the ones at the less complex end have a significant event audit, which is a quicker turnaround piece. So speaking about the more complex ones, which is the ones that most people would think need the most attention.
10 to 15%.
Yeah, that are what are currently called level 2 and 3, although we will move away from that. They're the ones that are more complex. My understanding of the current process is that the review is done, the report is drafted. There's an opportunity for people who are involved from a staff and from the patient or client perspective to provide some input at that stage. The report then finalised by the trust and then shared with SPPG as to conclude the process, is my understanding of how it should work currently.
The report is done and then it's shared with the staff involved for comment and feedback?
My understanding is it should be shared with those people who have been involved in it. Okay, and that would be the patients, or whoever the case is, if the patient and the family have chosen to be involved. Okay.
Can I ask, sorry, at that point, once the report is done, is it shared with the complainant, with the family?
Well, if it's in the more complex level 2, level 3, it should certainly be offered, because it should. My understanding is, part of the current process, it will be guided by what the patient or their relative have expressed as their preference for being involved. Okay, so sometimes people will say, yes, want to be involved, want to shape terms of reference and would like to see a draft and want to meet. Sometimes other people will say, you just keep me updated, I don't necessarily want to see it. And then there are people who say they don't want to be involved at all. So my understanding of the current requirement is that it would be shaped by what people express their preference is.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. And we'll be hearing from you again, no doubt.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, members, so we are now moving on to agenda item 8, which is oral evidence on transformation and outcome of hospital network consultation. So can I refer members to tab 8 where the papers are, page 186, and we're going to have officials. So I welcome Peter Jacobson, Director of Regional Health Services and Transformation within the Department of Health, and also Michelle Essler, Head of Transformation Branch within the Department of Health. So we have obviously got your presentation. I'm happy to hand over to yourself for some brief opening remarks.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the opportunity to update the committee on the transformation agenda. As you know, the session was originally scheduled in June, and we issued a short briefing note at that time, and that focused on the 3-year plan and the hospital network consultation. And that information is still relevant, but I'll focus sort of my opening comments just on the main developments since then. So, as you will be aware, the Minister published his reset plan on the 9th of July, and that set out, I suppose, built on the themes in the 3-year plan that was published in December last year. And that was to stabilise and reform the system, as well as improve how services are delivered. And within the overarching themes, the reset plan focused on 7 key areas. And the first is prevention, and the second is investment in community care, primary care and social care. And the third is improving efficiency and effectiveness in delivery of services. The fourth is adopting a whole system approach to reducing unwarranted clinical variation. And then the fifth is maximizing digital investment and the use of data. And the sixth, explore opportunities for research. And the seventh is creating an environment that supports system collaboration. A particular initiative to highlight is the commitment to develop a new neighbourhood model by March 2026. And the intention is to develop this in partnership with community pharmacy, GPs, voluntary and community sector, trusts, independent providers and local governments. So it's a whole system approach to that. Another development that's notable is the establishment by the trust of these new committees in common. And that is designed to facilitate shared decision making on issues that are best resolved jointly by the trust. So the matters to be resolved through that structure will be determined by the trust, but in discussion with the department. And aligned with that, the department has established a new senior leadership group, which includes the trust chief executives, PHA and BSO chief executives, as well as senior departmental officials and heads of professions. And this operates as with a one theme efforts and oversees the reset agenda. So the reset plan also commits to the publication of a report on the hospital network consultation, and I'll just turn briefly to that next, Chair. So the consultation involved 9 separate events, and people and organisations could also complete the online questionnaire or submit standalone written responses. We received around 30,000 responses, so a really significant response to that, with the majority from the Save Our Acute Services campaign group, around 28,000 or nearly 28,000 responses. Responses originated from citizens, a range of organisations and campaign groups. So if you recall, the consultation questions themselves in that consultation focused on the hospital structure, the identified core services associated with that, and the proposed actions then to try and facilitate collaboration across the hospital sector. The themes in the response to the consultation were very broad and to a significant extent went quite beyond the narrow focus of the consultation document. But the main themes were, and there were 7 of them, the first is data and evidence to measure better outcomes. The second theme that came through was around equality and real needs impacts. The third theme was around workforce issues, leadership and collaboration across the system. The fourth was around involvement, engagement and consultation. The fifth was specifically about the proposed hospital types and the core services. The sixth that came through was around patient travel, both in an emergency and for elective care. And the final kind of major theme was a broad range of specific concerns about specific services. I suppose pulling that together, many respondents expressed concern about potential loss of services or hospital closure. Also, a strong view that came through was that the decision-making process when making changes to hospital services is not very clear, and that local communities do not feel sufficiently involved in that process. And I think this is something both the department and the trust indeed will need to reflect on. So, Chair, that's all really I want to say by way of opening remarks. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, so I mean, there's an awful lot of important issues contained within this, and I'm quite certain members will have a lot of questions. So I'm going to suggest that members be succinct with their questions and that yourselves be succinct with the answers, so that we can make sure that we all get to cover that. So I'll hopefully do as I'm telling everybody else to do. So transformation is, there's nobody can deny that we need it. And it obviously, the Minister continually talks about shift left. You expect GP services to be vital in that, and the Minister's at, for lack of a better word, at loggerheads with GPs. I speak to a lot of GPs. There is serious anger within GPs and frustration, and quite a lot of them are talking about leaving the NHS and going private. That is something that we cannot allow to happen, something that the Minister and the Department cannot allow to happen. So how is this transformation, how is the Department, how is the Minister ensuring that GP services in the local community remain sustainable, and that we do not oversee the privatisation of GP services?
So I made this point many times before the committee. I don't lead on the GP services. There's another policy lead, and SPPG leads on the contract. So I'm not across the detail, I'm afraid, Chair. What I will say though, there is a clear intent that the neighbourhood model will involve GPs, and I think they have to be central to that. Obviously, that's a massive problem at the moment, given where we are. I mean, there is, I know Minister and Perms, I guess, reach out to GPs to try and discuss how we can move forward, which will include probably developing a model and then looking at the contracts for next year and how we change the contract. But I think that's, as far as that goes, I think that's the direction of travel. Okay, so I mean, you did say at the very beginning in your presentation that separate policies leads wouldn't be here, so that's maybe a wee bit disappointment from our thing, because I imagine members will have detailed questions on detailed issues. I'm not going to push you if you've said you're not the thing, but it is something that we really need to get to grips with, and get to grips with very, very quickly. What we obviously can do is go back in writing on some of the issues. I mean, I apologise up front. I'm not the policy lead for everything in the department. I can't be, right? So I'm not across the detail in a lot of these. I lead in certain projects. It might have been using a wee bit of foresight. I mean, with 5 seats there, we could have accommodated another 3 policy leads, given the expectation that we might have had questions on some of these issues. Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, I can obviously talk to the network consultation, because I led on that. So if there's detailed questions, I can absolutely talk to that one. Okay. So again, I mean, from this committee's point of view, I mean, I am going to suggest that maybe now that we have a bit more time moving into the autumn, that we look and interrogate exactly what the Minister means when he talks about shift left, because he says it an awful lot. And we really need to start details. So I'm going to ask you here, can you start to provide some details of what actually the shift left means, particularly about removing services from acute hospital? So I think the reset plan does provide some direction of travel in this about this new neighbourhood model. That's what it's very clear. Now, it does say we will develop that model by March 2026, and I know, so it's led by Cathy Harrison and Guru Cassidy in the department, and they already had at least one workshop, and I know they've had discussions with a whole range of stakeholders already. So I think the plan for that is to develop the design principles around what that might look like, and then engage with the trusts, and for the trust to work up what is that kind of neighbourhood model looks like for each trust area. And there will be some strong design principles behind that, which I think the idea is to try and have them ready in the next couple of months. I think there's probably I think there's a full session to be had on that once that kind of takes shape. But to my mind, that is the big kind of flagship, I suppose, initiative around shift left. Yeah. And we do need to start to see more detail on meeting the bone.
Yeah, and one of the other, another example is the hospital at home, which is about moving and taking care of that older population in their own home rather than acute hospital. So it's around virtual wards, and I know the committee have talked about that in the past. But that's another
very good example of how we would shift left of treating somebody in a community and in their own home rather than in a hospital setting where appropriate.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think the other thing maybe points, and I know we have a session on window pressures in October. The big discussion that we've had over the last 4 workshops, over the last, I suppose, since March, some of the themes version from there is all about trying to look after people in their homes and in care homes as opposed to bringing them into hospital. So it's about getting as much support as possible close to people and try and prevent hospital admissions and admissions to ED.
Okay, I'm rattling through these. They're my issues. So I see in the presentation you've given us key achievements 24-25, securing pay settlements and the restoration of pay parity with England for health and social care staffs. So key achievement for the department, it's claiming that in 24-25. When can we see the outworkings of that for the next year? I'm meeting with nurses. They are extremely worried. They're extremely disgruntled, and rightly so. You know, we all stood on picket line supporting our nurses, and we all support our nurses. They deserve, along with other healthcare staff, to be paid. When is the department going to resolve the pay issue?
And I think the Minister absolutely agrees with all that, and he has given the direction to pay that, but obviously that's going to the Executive, so he needs the Executive to agree to that direction before he can pay it. And we don't have the money at the moment, so that includes also the provision of that, the money to actually pay it out. Yeah. So until the Executive takes that decision, he can't move on payment.
The Health Minister is responsible for sorting this out.
Yes, but as I say, the process is once he gives a ministerial direction, that goes to the Executive for decision.
And when the Minister was setting his budget at the start of the year, did he not know that there was an agreement for pay parity? Did he not know that healthcare staff needed to be paid and that there was going to be additional resources needed?
I think the Minister did make points about the budget being extremely tight for this year and insufficient at the time. So I think that's all I can say on that one.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's a very important issue for the Health Minister, and it's coming to crunch time. I would suggest to ensure that. I mean, another issue I'm seeing in terms of the 3-year plan, important issue, mental health. I had a meeting earlier today with the Royal College of Psychiatrists. Workforce issues. There's not the recruitment of staff, there's not the retention of staff. Again, pay comparisons between north and south, as well as other parts. No, it's astronomical. There's an issue with the implementation of the mental health strategy. Can you reassure us that the growing mental health crisis within the north is being addressed within the department?
I can assure that we're doing the best we can with the budget we have. That's all I can give you. Again, I don't lead on mental health. I'm not across the detail. We can come back to you on that if there's specific questions you would like to answer on the mental health strategy. Yeah. I know it's not resourced the way it should be. Minister knows that, but given the budget pressures, as you know, we are looking at a budget gap of about 600 million this year. So in that context, it's difficult you can't fund everything, obviously.
And I mean, I don't want to pick on you two because you have come here, but I mean, you've sent us a presentation with all of these issues on it. I mean, we have to ask these questions.
No, I accept that. What I'm saying, we can come back and write. I mean, I could have brought 15 other people with me, but that's not possible.
Well, that's something we need to learn in future because if this is one of the most important issues affecting our constituents in this health committee, then whenever we allocate a period of time, we need to ensure that it's best used. So anyway, something that I hope you can answer, hospital reconfiguration.
Yes.
So there was probably a lot of criticism at the time on the consultation document that it didn't maybe go as far, didn't contain the detail that people expected. It was kicking the can down the road. Yep. But even withstanding that, 30,000 responses, I think you said 29,000 of them from SOAS probably, within the Western Trust in relation to the Southwest. So there was a debate in the chamber the other day. The Minister, I mean, I listened to the debate, wasn't able to stay, but I know Dan and Colin and everybody else asked questions. The Minister didn't really answer any of them, to be truthful, and everybody else will probably outline that. So in terms of the Western Trust decision in relation to general surgery, there's a configuration of that with all these other consultations and strategies. How will it all tie to hospital reconfiguration? Because there's news did a piece today saying the minister's given a commitment to the South West acute, but I don't think anybody thought that was in jeopardy. What is in jeopardy is the actual services that are contained within the South West acute. So, how does all of this reconfiguration work, and when will the minister and the department have a view on that?
Okay, so there are a lot of issues in that, obviously. So the consultation, as you're right, it didn't actually commit to any specific reconfigurations. It was more about a network of hospitals collaborating to try and deliver better outcomes, and we gave examples of how that's already happening. And we basically were saying we need to do more of that to deliver best services for people. It was meant to give a framework for specific reconfiguration decisions, such as the one in Western Trust. So that was the purpose of that document. The Western Trust consideration of that specific service can go ahead regardless of the outcome of the consultation, to my mind. It's not contingent on that, because actually the hospital reconfiguration document didn't say anything about general emergency surgery in Western Trust. Actually,
it was lacking in detail
yes,
across the board.
Yeah. So therefore, Western Trust can go ahead with that consultation and take a decision in line with the guidance that we have on that.
Okay, I'm sure everybody else is going to ask.
I didn't answer the question about timescale. So we are obviously working up a final draft report, which we think, Michelle, we get to minister before the end of this month. That's how the timescale working to. So a couple of weeks away, minister will then grade and we'll get it published. And that'll set out a response to the issues raised in the consultation. Okay,
and then just the waiting list, which is just a whole item in itself, but so the minister made an announcement there recently about a reduction in some of the waiting lists, which is important to those people within that. But I mean, cancer waiting lists are still, very worryingly long. I mean, that is something of concern to everybody. And I mean, we have the new regional service for the waiting list, but is there likely to be a new? It's not reducing waiting times. It's maybe evening out waiting times across the north. So, what is the actual strategy for reducing that? The important thing of waiting times.
Okay, well, obviously, the executive and the department's committed to investing the 250 million this year. I mean, that should obviously make a difference and start to reduce those waiting times. And that's direction. We need to do that every year. We need to commit to this every year to get these down. But I mean, I think we said before, and other officials are leading that, will have said it. Even with if you had all the funding you needed, you'll still take at least 5 years to start to make a real inroads into that, because there's only so much capacity you can actually get out of the system, locally with the private sector and public.
And is because you've moved to a regional waiting list system, is there a regional system being considered?
I'm not sure. I don't know. I know that for some, obviously that specialty there are, and I think it makes sense. I think if there's significant variances across, and it's not sustainable to have a scenario in one trust you might wait for 4 weeks, in another trust you're waiting for 10 months. Yeah. It's really unfair. So that's why I think with that particular breast assessment, I moved to a regional list to try and at least equalise things. And I think that's
it's unfair and totally wrong that you're waiting beyond the time frame whenever this is life threatening.
Oh, completely.
That's the key issue that we need to get to resolve.
But it does require funding and capacity to start making a proper inroads into this.
Okay, Peter, I could literally question you for 2 hours and you probably would throw back an hour and a half because you're not the right person, so that's this point, but I'm going to move around the room now. Dan?
Thank you, Chair. So, Peter, just to clarify, you are the official in charge of the hospital network consultation. Okay, so you understand how the dynamic of this works. So, in terms of the Southwest Acute Hospital, we have a situation where we have a hospital network consultation, which talks about the South West Acute as being a general hospital. We have a consultation from the Western Trust about closing emergency surgery at the South West Acute Hospital. And we have an intervention from the Minister in July via the local press. Quite why it wasn't put out via the department, I don't know, which says the Western Trust must bring forward a sustainability plan for the hospital. Now that in itself is welcome. That's not an issue. That's welcome. How do those three things interact? And which will come first? The hospital network consultation, the Western Trust consultation, or the Minister's sustainability programme?
So
you understand why people in the southwest of Northern Ireland are confused by what's happening, and they're very, very angry.
So, I can't speak for the Minister in terms of what he meant by that letter or that intervention. Sustainability plan, I think what the point he was making was if you're to change the service, it might be better to do it in the context of a wider plan for the hospital. I suspect that's what he meant.
I suspect my colleague here might have something to say about that, but, in terms of Causeway as well. Yeah. So like what we're actually doing is we're changing services, but we're not telling people what services will be under the roof of the SWA.
I think that was the point.
We're not telling them how life will be better, how their access to healthcare will be improved. We're doing this blind and in the dark. Do you understand now why you got 28,000 responses to the consultation from the Southwest?
Oh, we completely understand why we got that. Yeah, no, it is the emergency general surgery issue.
I think this is one of the most unsatisfactory situations that we could imagine. We have the most rural population in Northern Ireland. We're talking about taking away one service. We're not telling them what services are going to be there. And we're merrily proceeding with a consultation with the Western Trust. Sorry, just to move on. In terms of the Western Trust consultation, so the Western Trust can take a decision in relation to emergency general surgery. Who says yes or no to that decision in the department?
Well, that's according to the guidance that is for the department to determine, but I think this is major.
Who says yes or no?
Major and controversial, that will be the Minister, to my mind.
Well, we know it's going to be controversial.
Yeah.
So it will be the Minister at the end of the day that says whether emergency general surgery or emergency surgery continues or is restored or not.
He will say yes or no to that decision.
He will say yes or no. Oh, thank you for that clarification. That's really, really important. And I suppose on the back of that, we've heard since I took up the Health Committee, how important it is to have transformation. And when I look at this list of achievements, I see that we've launched a consultation into the Hospital Network Programme. We launched that consultation on the 1st of October last year. We are almost 1 year down the line, and we have not even an idea what the consultation responses say, and we've no decision on the Hospital Network consultation. Would you agree with me that the pace of change is glacial?
So obviously there are changes on the way all the time. Outside of that,
I'm talking about this particular change. This was launched as the big idea, and we're 11 months down the line, and we don't know what the consultation process says.
You will find out shortly. But yes, I accept it's taken some time.
To be honest, I really do think it's pretty unacceptable to be 11 months down the line from the launch of something.
So it closed at the end of February.
Yeah, so it was a 5-month consultation and then it closed at the end of February.
Every time,
so I accept from the end of February to now.
If we have a consultation then, Michelle, on this reset programme and on neighbourhood health, how long will it be before we have a decision on it?
Well, we're not proposing a consultation on the reset. That was a plan that was published. There won't be
So you're
basic
not proposing
consultation.
any consultation on changes to services in the community? I mean, I actually think some of it sounds very sensible, but, you know, but the point I'm making is that we were told, and Professor Bengoa was brought here to lecture us all and tell us all that change must happen. And we're 11 months on from the launch of that consultation and we have no idea of the outcome.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I want to leave it there. Can I also say, I may have missed this, and this might have happened and I don't know anything about it. And that's on me. You say in your list of achievements for the Minister that you have established a new children and families arm's length body. One of the series of recommendations contained within the Independent Review of Children's Social Care Services, led by Professor Ray Jones. Has that happened?
You get back to you on that. I'm not across that in detail.
Anybody know?
He said he was setting up a shadow. He'd already set up a shadow.
Probably a shadow form. It's not actually in existence.
So that's not what it says.
No, I need to get back to you on that because it's not something I'm
It's just,
across.
you know, if we're going to have all these things, we do need to have clarity around what is or is not happening, and that's really quite important as well. Could I ask just another question on the reset programme? And I agree with you, Chair, there's so much in the reset that I think we probably do need a separate session just on that itself, because that was published, I think, in July, if I'm not right, and it's just so big. Now, I do welcome some of it. I do think some of it is very sensible and so on, but I'm really interested to know, for example, in the Southern Trust, we already have an acute care at home service. So to enhance that acute care at home service would be a good thing and would take many more people out of hospitals. But actually in some other trusts we don't have any such service. So I'm just interested to know how you're going to work that through and what the trusts are saying, because what we don't want is to continue with this sort of postcode lottery of service, you know, that you can get it somewhere and not others. I mean, Peter, like, I am disappointed that we don't know the outcome of this. I can't express it any other way. And I think that if we are really to make any effort at transformation, if we take a year to take every decision, we'll probably take very little in this mandate. It's really the nub of the whole thing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Colin?
Thank you, Chair.
Peter, we were working our way around this. What I think would be absolutely interesting would be if the Minister managed to find a way that the implementation of these was actually controversial and cross-cutting and had to be taken by the executive rather than by a singular minister, just how much of this would be objected to and how much of it would be given airtime. I think we would find there would suddenly be a lot more sort of quietened concern. It says in the preamble at the start of the report that there would be a report completed by the summer by the Minister. I presume, is that the one that you've said it'll be maybe into the autumn time now? That's just that's the one that will be delayed a little bit.
Report on the consultation, yeah. That's going to the Minister before the end of this month is the aim.
There was a distraction in that there's only three of us. We were working on the consultation report and then we're redirected to the reset plan. And now we're going back to the consultation report. But there's only three
but
of
it's
us.
incoming anyway, hopefully, in the next period of time.
Yes, we have a draft.
And the reference as well, I noticed one of the other ones, just to make a comment on the £200 million worth of savings that have already been found. I just wonder what that savings is from. You know, that obviously means that there is services that are being reduced or changed or not delivered the way they would be. And just, I think it shows how precarious our health service is, that £200 of savings must have had a massive impact on service delivery, and that's what they've got to date, and I'm sure that they'll be asked for more savings as the period of time goes ahead because of the lack of budget that's been given to the department, so there will be more savings coming in. I also noted that in terms of waiting lists, I thought it was just an interesting, just as a comment, the Minister was out and all over a whole series of fabulous reductions in waiting lists. I think it was like on a Tuesday or a Wednesday of not last week, the week before, and then the very next day there was a whole round of statistics that were published where you didn't meet the targets, and there was no minister out making any announcement of that. So we'll call him the Minister of Good News, but doesn't want to be the minister that delivers any of the bad news. In terms of the classification, the waiting times for emergency departments, the Lagan Valley and Down were typically known as level 2 emergency departments, but in the most recent document that was published, they've been referred to as level 3. Yes. That sounds to me like a downgrading. Has that been discussed, approved, presented, or have we been...
It has, yes. So I don't think they were ever level 2, actually. So what happened, I think it was last year, we adopted the English definitions of the emergency departments. And a level 3 is defined as something that's not 24/7, which they are not. A level 2 is actually a highly specialist ED, for example, eye care or something like that, and that's all there is in the level 2. So I don't think they were actually ever level 2. They are level 3 because they are not operating 24/7. A level 1 is an ED that operates 24/7. So we just bring them, I suppose, into line with the rest of the units.
I suppose it certainly would fulfill...
For clarity, there's been absolutely no change to the service. The service exactly what it was before, where we call them level 2 or level 3. The same service.
Yeah, but it just shows, I mean, we've been making arguments all along that the emergency departments have been downgraded, and we've been constantly told well, it's only a level 2, it's not been downgraded more than that. And going back 15 years in the arguments back with the trust, we would be told, well, it's a level 2, and we're very proud of the fact that it's a level 2 service, and it's there, it services the community well, and it's a level 2. No worry, we're not going beyond that, but suddenly just overnight for it to then become a level 3, I think is a recognition of how little a service is actually being provided in for them, and that sort of underpins the argument that we have been making all along. So at least it's recognition at long last that it's not the type of service that it was or that we would have expected in our community. So
it's not a 24/7. That's very clear. You know,
we know. We know. We well know that it is.
And actually,
it isn't.
There's actually a good model there where I know ED consultants from the Ulster are travelling down to do shifts in the Down, in Lagan Valley to keep that going, that service. So I think that's a network model. I think it's a good model actually that works.
Okay, the other thing, just as a final comment, I don't like maybe just some of the commentary that there is, because regarding the previous things that have happened and not been considered, and it builds a bit on what Diana said, because we have been consistent along the time saying that we are up for transformation, but transformation means looking at the whole system. And if during that process of, transformation, for want of a better term, if you're rearranging the chairs as to where the services are, it felt a bit odd that there were chairs being taken off the platform, such as Causeways Maternity, such as the emergency service in the Swas, much as the emergency department in the Down. These services, and Daisy Hill as well, they were being removed before we looked to see what chairs are there to be able to reconfigure them. And we've always felt that was a wrong way. I actually feel it's not from yourselves, but I think that process is a bit underhand, because those services are being taken out of a community, and then we're looking at the overall system and saying, well, that service isn't there anymore, so it can't even be considered as part of the way going forward. And I think that really has upset a lot of people in the community, and that's why there have been so many responses. But just a final note as well, the South West Acute, the Down Hospital, the maternity services at the Causeway, and the issues in the Daisy Hill. And I made this point in the House the other night, all rural. Please go back down to that department and shout that the rural community deserve services as well. The greatest measure that there is of a population, one of the easiest ways for a measure of a population, is to look at the constituency boundaries, because it sets in law how many people must live within a constituency. And we've just went through a boundary review that saw the boundaries in Belfast change because there wasn't enough people living in Belfast to maintain 4 constituencies. It had to extend right out into the rural area. That says to me that the city population is actually starting to get less, and that the rural community is where there's more people living. But each and every one of the things that have taken place, the significant changes in the past, have all been to rural services, leaving rural people to travel further. So can you please go back and just amongst your department, if there's lots of them living in the city, just remind them that us people that live out in the country, that we are entitled to services as well. And part of that reconfiguration will see maybe some services available to us in the rural communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Nola?
Thank you very much. I understand it's difficult if you're not representing and able to comment on all of the issues. I just wanted to pick up from what Colin said. I totally agree, but highlight that the Mater Hospital, which is a city hospital, has undergone service change over the years, and service change that did actually happen.
It's one of the 3 hospitals the Belfast has.
But I completely understand the point, though, and this is where the issue lies. Information. We don't have it, we can't scrutinise it, therefore where do we go from there? And speaking as someone from the Alliance Party who has fought for transformation, who has stood up in council when other parties have voted against something, actually just raised our heads and voted for it because we knew it would work out better, and there are areas in which it absolutely illustrated that has been the case. But it gets difficult if we do not have the information and we can't supply our constituents right across Northern Ireland with the confidence. But I respect that it is highly political, and that is not your fault. So I just want to ask how many teams internally are actually working on these different issues. And if it wasn't highly political, do you actually have a plan? Based on consultation with experts, with clinicians, with communities, how you can fill the gaps. I'm not asking you to tell us what they are because they haven't got approval, but do you have it?
So issues, you mean the reset plan? Or
Not just reset plan, reconfiguration, all of it, because they're all one. They're all different names, but they're all together.
See, the thing about the reconfiguration, most of that, I suspect, or actually I know, is in trusts. They'll be working on those because most of them are for trusts to take forward. So there is some regional work obviously happening. So I lead, for example, on neurology and stroke. So my team, we're doing work on stroke reconfiguration at the moment, which is to conclude in probably next year. Which obviously could be controversial. We don't know yet. I don't know what the outcome is going to be. So that's clearly work that's going to happen. But if that leads to a closure of even one stroke unit somewhere, that will be highly controversial. Absolutely. So some of that work is happening, yeah, for sure.
And in terms of the teams that are working on these issues, because you just said you were diverted to the reset plan, and we have the reset plan, reconfiguration, the hospital networks, and all different plans on reform, tackling waiting lists. But how many different teams are working?
When the first time we came up to the committee, I did try and address that because I appreciated your point that we can't cover everything here, and the last thing we wanted to do was say, that's not me, that's somebody else. So we did give a list of all the different key strategy, key areas of reform, new ways of working, with a contact name within the department. Now, obviously, that's a year ago we've sent that, but I recognise that if you did want to deep dive into a certain area, or you wanted to see how many different areas do you cover, there was that document.
But
so there is lots.
And
it was pages long.
I don't know how many. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it sounds like there is a high number of people.
There's a lot of people working on policy.
Has there been a high number of consultation going on with clinicians, with administrators, and is that constant?
Well, all of these things are always clinically led, so clinicians have to be involved in all this.
It's the issue is, in my view, political. There's no change because it's political, and we'll be much further. And I do think that we need the information in order to scrutinise, to actually sell it to our constituents. I mean, the minister said that in the chamber, and I cannot remember the date, that there would be elective, I can't remember the exact word, elective surgery more at SWA because there was empty theatres, empty wards. Mm-hmm. Where are we on that? Those promises, they help to illustrate that we will continue to have jobs in your community. We will continue to have transport to get you to A&E if you need emergency surgery. And I appreciate that things are political in the decision making, but information needn't be political. And I say that that there is a responsibility for everyone to actually just realise that if we are going to fix the healthcare system, we can't be using it as a political football. Thank you.
Just before thank Danny, because you mentioned that you are overall responsible for stroke services, so I mean you'll obviously be aware of the news. I think it was, I can't remember which newspaper it was in, but
Telegraph yesterday.
Okay, Belfast Telegraph. So that 40% of stroke patients are arriving to hospital via car as opposed to ambulance.
Seen that.
So what are you doing in terms of ensuring that stroke services are accessible, and also, because I don't think you can oversee it without dealing with the ambulance service, so what is happening with regard to that?
That particular issue is clearly an ambulance service issue. So that
well, it particularly it could be an ambulance, or it could be the location of stroke services and the availability of stroke services.
Yeah, but I think most of that is probably, it's people phoning for an ambulance that's not available in a timely fashion, and they drive themselves to ED because they need to get there as soon as possible. As stroke is a time-sensitive issue, and some of the treatments, thrombolysis, you need to get that within 4.5 hours. So the advice is get to ED as soon as you possibly can, because that's where you get that service to get assessed, and if you need it, you get that service. So yes, about getting patients there as quickly as you can. I think from my reading of that, I think that's an ambulance capacity issue. So there are, as part of the winter plan, and you'll hear that next month, there are steps now to try and tackle the ambulance handover times. So a stepped approach to try and get that down. So at the moment there are many ambulances are waiting even more than 2 hours outside EDs. There's so much lost capacity there that has to be tackled. Mm-hmm. So there's a plan now to try and get that down stepwise over the coming months. So that should free up some capacity, and obviously longer term there's a commitment to increase the paramedic training in cohort as well to try and bolster the capacity. But there's no doubt, NICE is under huge pressure.
Apologies to Danny, but in terms of the stroke services, so they're available in Belfast office hours essentially.
That's the thrombectomy service. Yes, that's probably about 10 to 15% of patients can benefit from that. So there's a business case being developed to move that to 24/7. It's going to cost about 5 million a year. The issue is that we haven't had the funding to do it. We are constantly banging the drum on that one, but it doesn't have that funding to do it yet.
That would be welcome if it could happen. Sorry, Danny, I keep eating into your time.
No, fair enough. I was interested there, just we've moved on to stroke and the stroke action plan. I know the stroke action plan has not met any of the targets that it was supposed to have. I think we were supposed to aim for, was it 12% by March last year?
Yes.
And we haven't hit that.
No.
For thrombectomy. No. So we are lagging.
That's contingent on 24/7 service. We haven't got the 24/7, so we'll never get to that unless we have 24/7. That's critical.
And the issue that you raised there about ambulance capacity, the ambulance capacity is because, as you rightly identified, the ambulances are stacked up outside hospitals for, and I think you said 2 hours there.
No more. There's many over 2 hours, but the first target is to eliminate
16, those. And actually, we met with paramedics who were telling us that they were changing shifts outside hospitals. So your ambulance is stacked up. So it's not necessarily an ambulance service problem. That's a hospital patient flow problem.
100%.
And that's what's impacting the stroke patients who are category 2, I think.
Yes,
so
right.
That's why.
No, it's absolutely a hospital flow issue. It's simply getting the patients into hospital in the first place, and that's why they're sitting there. It's not acceptable, and we need to resolve that.
But it's more about the back door and being able to get patients out and keep that flow moving. The questions that I was going to ask initially around the consultation, 30,000 responses. The majority of the group. You said 28,000 responses from the SOAS group?
Yeah.
So the number of responses came from outside the remit of the consultation. Is that those 28,000?
No, so I didn't mean responses. I mean a lot of the issues raised were outside the remit. So we got, I think they all addressed the consultation in one way or another. Okay. But a lot of the responses made comments that were kind of not directly related to the questions we asked in the consultation. Lots of wider comments about fears of losing services, hospital closures, not being listened to, not trusting the department and the trust actually when we got for consultation, thinking it's a done deal already and you're just tick boxing. that kind of feedback, and that's
a
and fair points to make.
concern, yeah.
I'm not saying they're not fair points to make.
Just read you what we got here. There were a number of responses on issues outside the remit of the consultation. For example, the request to reopen previous decisions on service changes, particularly in relation to the temporary removal of emergency general surgery at the South West Acute Hospital, closure of the emergency department at the Down Hospital, and the removal of maternity services at Causeway Hospital. So they were outside the remit of the consultation. All those responses?
Yes. Well, those issues were not the response themselves. So they might have answered the questions, but also added those comments in, and maybe they might have written many pages on issues that were outside of the particular questions that we asked.
Are those responses being counted then?
Yes.
They are being counted?
They have been counted in it, yeah.
Okay. No problem. Just thought that's quite a lot. I suppose it's 90%, isn't it? It's more than 90% of the responses that you got then? Yeah. Okay. Second question. We're sitting on a £600 million deficit at the minute, largely due to the minister's promises over staff pay that haven't been fulfilled yet, as the chair had referred to. If this isn't resolved, are services at risk here? And if so, what services are going to be at risk?
So obviously there is a program underway to try and deliver savings this year. Mm-hmm. I think it's going to be very difficult, and I think the Minister said that you can't deliver 600 million, but deliver as much as we can. Mm-hmm. That will impact on services, there's no doubt. I remember last year, Minister said he would not touch any savings that had catastrophic impacts. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure if he said that this year, but I mean, absolutely any savings we make will have some service impact. You can't make savings without it nearly. Unless it's something like, and there's a big program, for example, on reducing agency work to try and reduce that bill, mm-hmm. and then recruit staff permanently. Actually, you probably can save a bit, because if the agency or locum staff is more expensive, mm-hmm. you can probably replace. So there's some small savings to be had that way, without maybe impacting on service delivery. But once you start cutting actions of scaling back services, it will have an impact clearly.
You can't say services.
I haven't got the detail about which service, and I think it's actually still being worked through. There's a program that's been led by the finance part of the department, and I think they even meet weekly to try and work through these things. So this is an ongoing process.
You've mentioned the level 2 AEDs there as well. What's a level 2 AED?
Level 2 ED.
Yeah.
It's a very highly specialised ED, so we don't actually have any in Northern Ireland, but it's something like, for example, specifically if you have an eye emergency, there's some EDs that are specialised just for that in the UK, but we don't have any in Northern Ireland. I think we used to have an eye specific ED in Belfast, I've been told years ago, but I'm not.
Did have an eye clinic in Belfast, an emergency eye clinic?
Yeah, but I think.
Do we not?
Yeah, I think we do.
Do we still have 2 level 2 ED departments?
I think it's, but I think it's. I don't think we have.
I think it's just reviewing the definitions to make sure that if you're comparing over to other nations,
Mm-hmm.
that you're making sure you're comparing like with like.
And that doesn't
it's just
exist.
the definite. It wasn't the service that was
We
changing.
don't have any of those in Northern Ireland.
As far as I know, no. So we have level 1s and 3s, and 1s is just 24/7 service. 3 is if it's less than 24.
Just one last question, if the chair. You'd said most reconfiguration will be taken forward by the trusts. Yep. So, which decisions are going to be the minister's decisions, and which decisions are the trust decisions?
Okay, so any reconfiguration decision that the trust make, mm-hmm. they will make it. If it's major and controversial, it'll go to the department for basically an endorsement or not.
Which is likely to be
many of these will be major and controversial, I would suggest. Mm-hmm. Certainly controversial.
So they'll not be taken forward by the trust, it will be the minister?
The trust will take the decision, the trust board will take the decision. They'll submit that decision to the department alongside a consultation report, all the evidence they have. Mm-hmm. The process is that goes to SPPG in the department. They will review that. They'll take advice from the PHA from a public health perspective. Mm-hmm. They'll take advice from the department's policy side that links in with that. And all that will then go in a submission to the minister with a recommendation either to agree or not. And if the minister turns it down, it's back to the trust to come back with a revised proposal. So that's kind of the process.
Ultimately, it's the minister's
it's almost like a
decision.
veto. The minister doesn't decide what the option is. He doesn't decide what the decision is, but the Minister has a veto, essentially, on the major and controversial permanent decisions.
Well, thank you for saying that.
So there's currently a decision awaiting or there's currently a position in the Northern Trust awaiting the Minister's decision with regard to that's exactly
The
what it
emergency
is.
surgery, exactly. That's the kind of scenario in there. Yeah.
Therein lies the problem of it being political.
Thank you, Chair.
Alan?
Thanks, Chair. Peter, we just had the last session there, and they were telling us that there was 69 responses to the SAI consultation. Sorry, they had an easy run whenever they were suffering through that.
Are you saying we're winning or losing? I'm not sure.
Well, I suppose the question is, in terms of the response that your department has had of 30,000, I assume that is extreme numbers, or is in the grand scheme of health consultations.
It's the most I know of. But
it's the most.
We're not sure if it's the most in just the Department of Health or the most across all departments. We haven't, not quite sure, but it's definitely up there.
Our friends in SOAS contributed heavily to that, so you know.
Get that, but there was a couple of $1,000 beyond SOAS, which again is an extreme number.
The couple of thousand
that's usual.
Wouldn't be.
Okay, so then that, how then the feedback from the consultation, how will that directly influence the proposed transformation plans, or will it at all, or have those people responded effectively?
So,
and what?
Well, obviously we need to consider the proposal that was in the consultation first of all, and see whether we still go ahead with some of that. So that'll be in the consultation report. There were specific issues. There was a lot of data shared, I think, around Fermanagh and so on in their responses. So obviously we will share that with Western Trust to consider as part of their deliberations as they take forward their consultation. There was information around transport was raised quite a bit, particularly in rural areas. So information we will share with the Department of Infrastructure. That's responsibility for transport in those areas. So we will share information as appropriate with the various stakeholders and partners that we work with, and then we'll consider the implications directly for the questions we asked in the consultation.
Was there numbers of staff who responded to the consultation, obviously concerned about service relocation?
There was definitely staff attending the consultation events. I'm not sure if we know actually if they were staff or not, the individuals.
Some of the citizens-based online responses would have identified if they were staff or not. So and they would have commented primarily maybe on the workforce one or rural aspects or in their capacity, other capacities. So yeah, that's been accounted for.
The funding in order to deliver upon this here, is there funding available for it?
No, there's no funding, but
funding.
There's no funding allocated to this at all at the moment. I need to consider what actually needs funding. Some of the actions don't need funding. It's about collaboration. It's about, for example, one of them is reviewing the transport policy. So that doesn't require funding. It's just a bit of resource in the department and across the system to actually review the policy and revise it. So some of the things don't need funding.
I'll do in the meantime, Chair. I'm conscious time.
Okay. Just before I let you go, I want to hog a couple of minutes. So, obviously 28,000, as you are attributing to the SOAS campaign, which, fair enough, they will have led the campaign, but they had to get 28,000 individuals to respond, so that in itself does send out a strong message about the strength of feeling with regard to that issue. Just want to make that point. Secondly, in our correspondence, we have got a letter from the Department of Finance where they're engaging with all the departments about a 5-year departmental plan. So I'm going to read out, because I suspect it resonates with what we're talking about here. So Budget Sustainability Division has been engaging with departments on their 5-year financial sustainability plans with formal guidance, right? So these plans will assist each department in setting its strategic direction by defining what it wants to achieve and how it will go about doing this with the available finances. These plans are due to be completed by the 12th of September 2025. So has the Department for Health submitted its 5-year plan to the...
I have certainly myself contributed to it. Whether it's gone to DOF, I assume it has. I mean, it's coordinated by the finance side of the department. So I don't actually know it's been submitted, but I know I contributed to it.
That will be a very important document in terms of, all of these things that we're talking about for transformation. So, can this committee get sight of that document?
I'll need to take that away.
Okay. But if the department is saying, here's what we want to do over the next 5 years, and here's what we want to spend our money on the next 5, that's crucial to what all of this what we've talked about in terms of setting the direction about transformation, about what the department sees the future role of GPs, what it sees in terms of the future role of pharmacies, what it sees in primary, all of that.
You're right. I mean, the money has to follow the priorities, otherwise there's no logic to it.
And how it intends to pay its staff, and how it intends to deal with the workforce issues that are affecting every single aspect of health. So I think we would like to see that document.
Yes, just Chair. Just following on the back of Colin's issue around rural communities and the fact that services, it seems to be easier to take services away in rural communities. The Minister did say that all policies were rural proofed. Can you send us what that looks like? What's the process you go through? Is it a tick box exercise? Just so we know, you don't have to do anything now, but if somebody would just send that, I think that would be helpful in helping us understand what rural proofing services mean. There are many of us here who come from fairly substantial rural communities.
We can do it. There is actually a rural proofing guidance that was
there's like a
co-produced toolkit, which is very good. So that's kind of what we follow.
We did complete a rural needs impact assessment as part of the consultation for the hospital network document, which we are now in the minute of revising it to reflect the feedback from the responses, taking on board some of the feedback that we got.
But just be interested to know what do you follow? What's the guidelines that you follow? That you say you've rural proofed something.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's okay.
And just before I let you go, finally, and this might be our issue in terms of who we invite in future, but there are presentations we get where one official is sufficient on this. I think in future, let's fill these chairs with the issues that are likely to be asked.
I mean, I suppose the issue, the reset plan is so wide, it covers pretty much everything in the department.
Yeah.
So unless we know exactly what you're going to ask us, it's difficult to then find.
Maybe there will be a bit of interaction between our.
It might be helpful to have with the clerk, maybe just to have a sense of what the issues might be.
Okay.
We can get the right people in.
Okay.
That'll be helpful, yeah.
Perhaps just the permanent secretary, because
we're getting him.
And the minister, they own the reset plan.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay.
So, members.
Can we just would it be possible to get some clarification on some things just on the back of that? I would really appreciate some sort of response about the classification of those emergency departments, not least for the fact that my contribution to that consultation was based on the classifications. And guess what? As soon as I put in a consultation response about the classification of the and given that the location of those units should be given some extra consideration as part of the network, all of a sudden they've been downgraded, and I think that is dirty and underhand, and I think it has been done to prevent any further movement. For the last 14 years they have been known as level 2 emergency departments. How can our department have got the classification of an emergency department wrong for the last dozen years? I mean, what sort of faith are we meant to have in anything else that's done whenever we're looking at classifications if they're getting something as blindingly obvious as that, as they put it, wrong? And the other thing is, could we ask for some sort of breakdown in the classification of the responses to that document? Because I would really want to say, I think this will be an excellent example for us. If 30,000 people have responded to this consultation, how much of what they say will be taken into consideration? And I think that this will set a very clear benchmark for full executive-based consultations going forward. If 30,000 people say something and there's no change of it, and 28,000 of them are on the one issue, then I'm sorry, consultations are not worth the paper that they're written on, because they're not listening to the people that they're consulting. So if we could get just a breakdown of what those 20 or 30,000 responses were about, and then we can monitor it against the changes that are made then to the document that they've done.
We normally do, whenever the department produces they will come before us and bring that detail, don't they?
Certainly the committee can request to have a briefing.
Yeah, it'd be good to have it in writing in advance of them coming, that we can interrogate it.
Yep, fair enough. Does anybody else have any other comments in relation to that?
And just that I do think that the reset plan is massively important, particularly in relation to the issue that you raised around GPs. They are going to be fundamental to delivering a neighbourhood plan, and I think we should have some kind of presentation on that reset plan and how they hope to move that forward. Some of it sounds really sensible. I don't have an issue with it. We just need to know how we do it.
So the Permanent Secretary is coming when?
The 2nd of October.
And he is coming specifically on
business plan.
Business plan. Could we write and get a bit extra time and tell him that we would, because he's the person.
He certainly seems to be the person driving it.
Yes. And I was at the nursing conference yesterday. That's what he was there to talk about.
Yes.
So I think if we could have him there for a bit extra time, and I'll tell him that we will be asking questions, or at least say that we're going to ask him questions.
He is immediately saying, how are we going to fit it all in?
Mm-hmm. Well,
I can see that in his head.
Well, in fairness, we were due to have a briefing that day that's had to be pushed back a few weeks.
Right, okay.
But we'll need to check the timings of when the Perm Sec's available that day, because I know there was a slight problem with the timings and we had to move things around, but I'll follow up on that.
But I said it on that there, I certainly would like this committee, if we had time in terms of our strategic forward work programme, to look at what exactly shift left means in detail, and how we can help and assist the Minister, the Permanent Secretary, the Department in co-designing that, along with all the other community, the secondary care services out there, because it's vitally important that we get beyond the rhetoric and to the detail. So we'll make that request and see if that can be accommodated. So I'm conscious that we're way over time, so we will try and rattle through some of this quickly that we can. Item number 9, written briefing on the Children's Hospital. It's in tab 9, page 193. Obviously it's just started, so that's basically all they're telling us, that it started. And hopefully in more detail it'll be as we move forward. Has anybody else any comments on it?
Good to see that it remains in budget at the minute. So far.
Yes, for now.
I'm going to suggest, if people are happy, that the strategic. Sorry, what were you suggesting?
I was going to say, in relation to the forward work programme,
Okay,
and the strategic plan, and we can push that.
Are people happy that we push that back? Okay, so we're going to move on then to correspondence, if everybody's happy. So correspondence, item number 10. So can I just refer members, so there's the committee staff have put a table, if I can just open it here, with suggested decisions. So there's a number of items that I'm just going to raise for comment. So Diane and Alan at tab 10 have sent in a letter in relation to the department's gender services.
Mm-hmm.
So some of that might, I'm not suggesting it has, but some of that might have been superseded by the review of the review that the Minister has outlined during the week. Can I make a suggestion that maybe we wait and see the outcome of that before bringing?
I understand how that has thrown a little bit of shade on the fundamental issue at the start. I still think it's worthwhile having a brief presentation from those involved. There is 800,000 of public money. We're not terribly sure how that public money is going to be spent, and just the parameters of the service itself. I think it might be a useful thing for us to hear that from those involved. I find it a little bit strange that the Minister allocated funding to the service and then asked for a review of the service. So I don't know whether that was the cart before the horse or whatever it was, but I just think it would be useful, because this service is going to continue now as we speak, and it's just to find out what the service entailed, who can be referred, how they can be referred, the issues of consents, etc., those kind of fundamental issues that I don't think any of us know, and as long as people don't know, there will always be talk about it. So that's my view.
Are people, any comments on that? No?
I think it's fine that, and right, that we ask for detail, because there was a review that went on for years and years, and Robin was asked previously about the outcome of it, and we haven't seen anything. But I do think, I mean, what's the point in doing it before this review? I mean, I'm not supportive of the reasoning behind this review at all. It just doesn't make sense. But what's the point in doing it without waiting until that's done? If it changes, or...
I mean, the Minister did say that they were only over for 2 days and it was going to be a quick review. So, I mean, if there's no disagreement that we get the briefing, I mean, it could be, you might expect it to have happened.
Probably wouldn't take place until after.
After, I mean,
well, I as long as we have the briefing, I think it's important for us to be able to see what the service is, and so on. And I think that, personally, I think it should go ahead, is my personal view of it, because I always think these reviews are supposed to be a 2-day review, but goodness knows what that actually means in reality. And that is my fundamental view. I accept if it's going to be a very, very quick and sharp review, that by the time we get the officials it might have been done, but that's okay. I don't think there's anything wrong with putting into and asking them.
Well, can I suggest that we put on the request, but subject to that, we also ask for the details of the timeline of the review.
That's okay. That's fine.
And that hopefully that dovetails. Okay. So there are 75 pieces of correspondence here. So, I mean, a couple of them I'm keen to make comment on. I mean, the one from pulmonary fibrosis, I met with and Tom McKellen. I know there was some media around that issue. I mean, when I met them, I was a bit concerned that people who need oxygen are having difficulty getting it when they need it and the quantity that is needed. So, I have wrote to the Minister on behalf of my constituents, but I don't think that there's any harm in forwarding that letter on from the committee, just so that the committee gets sight of a response and can take action if we think we need to.
Can I?
Yes, go ahead.
Sorry. So I'm just trying desperately to find it. It is the letter on page 268 from Dr. Kieran McManus. In relation to the managing high professional standards issue in the Belfast Trust.
Point 7 or point 14.
Where is it now?
Are we going through all of them now?
Just bear with me, I need it.
10.7 or 10.14.
I definitely need a technical expert.
So before you do that, Dan, I actually think that's a good. I think we should literally. I know there's a lot of them, but because we haven't met over the summer, it might. If I don't get that, it might be better that we just quickly go down through them all.
Instead of jumping backward and forward.
So I think that's probably. I know it's going to be a bit time consuming, but there is some important correspondence in here. So can I mean 10.2's Youth Assembly report? You know, any issues? Yes. It's here. Okay. The suggested actions are, we thank them, so I don't think there's any issue with that. No. The Committee for the Economy have wrote about a solvency bill, and we're just noting that, so I'm just going to rattle through this unless somebody stops me. The Finance Department for Finance, that's what I actually mentioned. I think that would be really good if we get sight of that 5-year plan, or at least what the department are suggesting. The BMA stuff, as we all have said, very important, but the committee's having a visit to the GP Federation on 25th and 9th, so the suggestion is that we leave that till then. Okay, RCNI, again, very important issue, and that's why I was kind of tying, because there's a lot on there about the workforce. You know, in that letter, the RCN are saying that the level of nursing staff has not increased to the levels that it need, and obviously that will affect patient outcome and also the work that nurses are having to do. So I think that we get further consideration to that whenever the RCN are on. So next one then is an individual in relation to the Belfast Trust. So we've forwarded that on to Peter McBride. Dan, that's the one you're talking about, 10.7.
No, maybe the 10.14 one.
It's later, so,
okay, so that's
the one that you're talking about is a separate individual.
Okay, so I mean, in terms of this one at 10.7, we're suggesting that we further it, or we consider it further when we meet Peter McBride, because we'll all have received numerous individuals in relation to that. I know
there's a lot to go through when we do that.
Yeah. Okay, 7 is Department for Justice stuff, and we're just noting that. 10.9, breast cancer review, committee forward to the department for comment. I mean, that is a big issue. I mean, it really, I mean, there's serious issues there with waiting line times, and it's, I mean, we will have Mark Taylor coming before us. I mean, I suspect in terms of overall waiting lists, but cancer waiting lists in particular will focus a lot of our conversation. Nuala?
Yeah, I think when he is coming up, I think we do need to ask him in advance for specifics, make sure he provides them around the breast cancer regional service.
Okay.
You know, we've all had constituents in touch. They're still not meeting the 31 days for treatment, and is it like the 8 or 9? Yeah, I can't remember the exact amount of days for diagnosis and being seen. When we contacted the trust that was undertaking it, the Southeastern Trust, you know, capacity was an issue, absences over the summer, and of course people are entitled to take leave. We can't run people into the ground, but we need kind of the forward planning. So I don't know if it's worthwhile. I don't know if they do this, but to ensure that they get the information from the trusts as well as to what mitigations will be put in place.
Yeah. I mean, I think we just need to flag up that we will be asking detailed questions, and we want detailed responses, and that, I mean, there will be a focus on all the waiting lists, because all of these things are important, but cancer is particularly important.
Yes, yeah, of course.
Okay.
Sorry, just to say, we do have a scheduled briefing on waiting list that was postponed from June, and it was to look specifically at paediatric waiting lists. Do you want me to tell the department we also want to focus on the breast cancer waiting list on that briefing as well as meeting with Mark at another point?
I think so.
If it's the same team and it makes sense to, but yes, I mean, I would say yes anyway, but that's not my...
The paediatric waiting lists are appalling. They are literally appalling. And I did some work on them and asked some questions about them. And I think that in itself is worthy of something separate.
Well, that's the way it was, so we'll just leave it like that.
Because they are pretty awful, particularly in the Belfast Trust, the Southeastern Trust. Now, I get that they're big trusts, and a lot of regional specialities are within those trusts, so I get that. And they cover a really wide range of conditions as well. But when you have children who are waiting 5 and 6 years, who are actually transferring to adult lists without being seen, that's a really big
no, you're right. That will be a question and answer on its own.
Well, Chair.
Okay, 10 and 11.
75.
10 and 11 we're just noting. The 12 was the RCM, that the issue they raised about video. So the response is a bit waffly, to be frank. I mean, I'm suggesting we forward it on to the Royal College of Midwives and seek their comments before going back to the department. I know I spoke to someone yesterday at the nursing conference about it, and they said they've actually done up some guidelines themselves, so it will be useful to see that. Finance is 13th for noting. 10:14 down is now this other issue about the Belfast Health and Social Care Trust.
Yeah, so this is a very specific issue that relates to Mr. McManus, and I do think it's worthwhile because he alleges that the trust either didn't supply full information to the committee or, as he alleges, misled the committee. So I do think it's worthwhile going back to the trust specifically on the issues that are there. But I was also looking at the Hansard of that meeting of the 12th of June when the trust leadership was here, and I specifically asked about this particular process that Mr. McManus refers to, and I asked because the Belfast Trust had more clinicians in this process than any other trust in Northern Ireland, and not just marginally more, a huge long way more. At one stage almost 10% of its clinicians were in this process, and I asked whether or not there was going to be a review of how this process worked, and it is Hansarded how this process worked, whether there would be an external review, when that review, and Chris Hagan stepped in and said, we've already started a review. So I have written to Chris Hagan over the summer to ask him for the terms of the review, whether the review will be external. Again, I'm not terribly fussed on the trust marking its own work for obvious reasons, and a range of those issues. And I would be really grateful if the committee would support a letter to the trust as well, asking about the review, the terms of the review, and that when the review is done, that they will come and present its findings to us here in the committee. This is such a serious issue and involved such a high percentage of clinicians, at times very, very senior clinicians in the trust. I think that getting the information on the review and the independence of the review in particular is massively, massively important. I think even for how the trust tries to go forward, actually.
Any comments?
Sure, just can I ask, obviously the suggestion by this gentleman is that the person presenting misled the committee. Is there some way that we can, how maybe the clerk can advise us, what happens if there's a suggestion that somebody that's presenting to a committee misleads us? Is there a way of us, is there somewhere we can refer that to? I appreciate that's not something that we would probably want to do in a public forum because that's not fair on the people involved, but there is a suggestion there that we were misled, and I wouldn't like to think, given the nature of what we were assessing, and remembering back quite rightly to the presentation that day that a lot of things were said, I wouldn't like to think that there was a suggestion that we were being misled, and I would like a concrete result on that one way or other. Either we weren't being misled, or if we were being misled, but just to determine what happens from that.
In relation to the accusation of being misled, if the committee want to take that further, we would go back to the trust and ask for clarification to state whether what they told us was factual, was accurate, and then once that comes back, or whatever the response is, then it'll be down to the committee to decide how to take that forward. There really is no, normally if somebody, I suppose there's a couple of types of misled. There's inadvertent misled, and then there is misleading. So I would imagine there would be, if it was a case of being misled, whether it's inadvertently, there would be an apology to the committee members and a correction of the record.
Well, even just a correction of the record, if it was at that stage, would be appropriate. We're not out here to take it, but if somebody, we need to be clear, because if we take evidence from trusts, we need to have faith that we're getting this right, and somebody else has suggested that was involved in the process suggested it wasn't right. So I think we should just interrogate that for a determination.
We can certainly go back to the trust and give them an opportunity to respond to what was
in the letter we've received, and wait to see what the response from that is.
Okay, you happy?
So we're also going to write about the review that was promised in that particular meeting as well. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Because I do think it is important that we ascertain that, given everything that has been going on. And so
Just from my memory, on the forward, when are we meeting Peter McBride?
It was due to be, we originally had it down for the 2nd of October, but he is actually hoping to report that week. So he is, and then he's planning on presenting the report to the Minister the following week. So at the minute we have him scheduled in for the 23rd of October.
Right, okay.
Is the date we have for him at the minute. And I'm just waiting a final confirmation on that date.
I'm not sure that he's in charge of the review. I think that's a separate thing.
It is, but it is.
I think that's a separate thing.
Okay, so moving on then, item 1015 from the Department of Health. So that's a note and for wait a further briefing. Everybody content with that? It's in relation to children and young people framework, emotional health and wellbeing. Item number 1016, written ministerial statement. So we're having a briefing on the 18th of 9th, so we can deal with it then. 10.17 is the private members bill in relation to duty of candor. So again, we have a briefing on the 18th of the 9th. 18 is ministerial statement on the reset. So again, consider further whenever we have 14 or 4th to the 12th. That's a long way off.
We're going to meet.
We've now agreed to do that, so that's good. Okay, then next one is on the palliative care inquiry. So it's going to be considered in written evidence for the committee inquiry. 1020 Committee of Justice letter, it's correspondence, so we're going to consider further at mental health champion oral briefing 23rd of the 10th. Okay, so next one's Linda's private members bill, so we have noted that. Next one is from SOAS, a letter of concern regarding the public consultation. I think we all had concern about the public consultation, so we're going to consider that further whenever we have a briefing from the Western Trust on the South West Acute. That's at the end of November. 23 is on the cytology review, so again we're going to consider that further.
And that's okay if we're doing it. It's okay.
Whenever we have on the completion of the review.
What's the date of that?
Is it in the letter?
Yeah,
Isn't it? I think there's.
Is there a date on it?
I thought, did they not give us sort of rough dates?
They gave us rough dates, certainly, that they expected it to be completed. As far as I can remember, it was due to be completed by around about now. So it was, but we were waiting then on a time frame for when we would get briefed on that.
Maybe she could just go back
So
and check when that.
Yeah, I think because in the week, I think it's about I'm going to say it's the start of October anyway. It'll be 2 years since they issued the recall letters. And we are still going through the process. We're still going through SAI processes, the lot in relation to that. And some of the figures that we now have, having asked for them for over a year, do show a variation across all trusts in the reporting of screening.
And that there, it's welcome that we've got the data, but it took an FOI to get it.
It did, and an appeal to the Information Commissioner, believe it or not.
Moving on then, 24, gradual rollout of UDAMED, just a note from the House of Lords. 25 is from the Department of Education. Minister, did the Minister agree to meet them, the Minister for Education? I know the Minister for Health did.
They asked for contact. We provided contact details for them to make arrangements.
Okay. So next one, CJINI is a report, and that's just for noting. It's in terms of detention and custodies. 27, again, an individual for health advice, so we've noted that. 28 is from, again, replying to an individual. So the committee further or briefing?
We also copied in their response.
Yes, okay.
So we're on that.
Fair enough. 29, individual letter, so it's again a complaint regarding DOH and data handling from the Western Trust, so we're going to consider that whenever we meet the Western Health Trust. Next one is investing activity report, so noting. Next one is from the Department of Health. It's reply in relation to the SAA families, so I mean, we've had a conversation about that today, so it's, I mean, we've raised those issues today. Next one is the BMA NA, and that's an update in the referendum for GP action. So, I mean, this is something of concern to us all, and something that the Minister does need to resolve very, very quickly with GPs, because, you know, certainly I have a growing fear about the disillusionment within GPs. I mean, we've seen our dentistry service and what happens whenever, you know, lack of funding. You know, none of us now can get a dentist without going private, and I mean, like, GPs are crucial to the NHS, and we need to ensure that this issue is resolved quickly. No other comments? No? Okay. Suspension of home care service packages. So we'll consider further when we meet the transformation and hospital consideration. We didn't actually mention it today.
There was a suggestion in that letter about a round table conversation that was taking place with the sector. Could we write and ask for an update on that? It's just, I know we'd done a little bit of work on that, and between 2019 2024 they've spent 1.3 billion in domiciliary care, and it was 69 million hours, and yet, you know, it's considered to be one of the biggest blocks to being able to get people out of hospital. And, you know, I'm sure we're all getting contacts in the constituency office to say people are having them removed or reconfigured or changed. So, and I think that the suggestion was maybe for us to have a look at that. Maybe Keith can correct me. Is that to have a look at that at today's presentation? Was it? So we're not going to get a further thing. So can we at least maybe ask for an update on that round table, and then based on that we can decide for something for going forward.
Yep. Next one, I mean, we've received a number of issues for the Western Trust, and we're saying that we will consider them further at the briefing with the Western Trust. Can I just ensure, Keith, that they're part of the pack in advance of that, so that we are considering them, just that we get them again reissued.
So any of those that have a date for further consideration after today will slot into that folder in the meeting pack.
Okay.
So they'll be within that.
Okay. Well then, in terms of me going through these, anything that says further consideration, I'm just going to move on. Anything I'm going to say note, I'm just going to move on. Okay? So we're moving then to 1039. So this is in relation to palliative care. So it's again considered as written evidence for our inquiry. So at 1042, Diabetes UK have sent in a request to meet with the committee. So we're going to suggest that we add that to the January committee clinic. Okay, Pharmaceutical Society have sent us a letter in terms of a consultation, Chief Pharmacist Standards, so we're noting it, but also awaiting a summary of the responses. Similarly, for the next one, in terms of the draft Learning Disability Service Model, the 1046 is an invite for the Chair to attend Chief Nursing Conference, which I've done.
Sorry, Chair, have I missed? Have we done the Northern Ireland Drug and Alcohol Alliance one, or you're on 1041?
The Northern Ireland Alcohol and Drug Alliance, that was a request that briefed the committee, and we slotted it into the committee clinic.
No problem, I just wanted to raise something there.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, apologies, it was a brilliant. I think it was myself and Diane were at it.
I was there.
Colin as well.
Sorry.
We're all there.
Just say it was a really, really good session. I learned quite a lot from it. And
it's very concerned.
That's right.
I don't know if you can call it a good session when you're talking about alcohol, but I see where you're going with it.
Just if the Northern Ireland Drug and Alcohol Alliance can be on a list of evidence providers if the minimum unit pricing does come up, and make sure that we get it in for.
I hate to sort of back up Danny's call, but I also talked to the heart people this week
Yes,
as well
sure.
on the exact same issue, and they had a really good presentation as well, which is very useful. I'm not as experienced as Colin in this subject, so I had to
teach you
find
anything
out.
you need to know, Diane. But they are doing an event in the Long Gallery, which I'm sure the invites. I think some of us have co-sponsored that on the minimum unit stuff, and those organisations will all be at it as well. So.
But I mean, the Minister said he's bringing forward that legislation, so we will get a chance to define who comes before us.
Yeah.
So we will, and they would certainly be one group.
Cancer Research UK were another one that they did similarly.
Very good.
So.
Okay, so I am now at 46. 46.
Yeah, 46.
I'm forward. Yep. So we'll do that. Forward that later on. Yep. So updating SAA. So we've done that. Next one, committee. So 1049 is background information from the Survivor Council of NI, and so the committee to note as a stakeholder. Okay. The autism strategy. So next two are coming before us. The next one's to note. The next one is in terms of our inquiry. Next two are coming before us. The next one's to note. So 1057.
I've missed another one again there, 1053.
Aye, but all of those are either there's briefings that we're going to have, Danny. So we've suggested
So
all of those.
enough. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
I'm just going to because we will get them sent to us whenever the briefing comes. So then the next one is 1057 from a letter from the Department of Health. It's in relation to apply about the establishment of mother and baby units. So what the suggested action is that we write to the department to request that it be informed of the outcome of the business case and for a timetable for the unit. Everybody content with that? Yep. Okay.
Chair, I just want to go back. I know we had something to do there for 1053, just with the palliative care questions for urgent answer. I know that was in response to questions that we had asked at a previous briefing here. There's some quite shocking figures within that. I know we're going to consider it as evidence for the committee inquiry. Is there an opportunity to raise that with the department again, or is that
in relation to that particular issue, it's made quite front and central of the committee report now, so it is, and to back up one of the recommendations, so it has. So
certainly the cost differentials that were mentioned in the letter are quite stark.
So it is. So I think it is definitely something we'll want to follow up in the inquiry, and then follow up after that with how it's brought forward.
Thank you.
Okay, so 58 to 66 are all for noting. So is everybody content that we just note that?
We had the Shankill Women's Centre one yet. Sorry.
Yes, go ahead.
I'm not paying attention. Sorry. I think that would be a really useful one to do, because the Minister talks about health inequalities, and the Shankill Women's Centre is a brand new centre situated right on the peace line with the falls. And if you're going to do a session on health inequalities and take some evidence, I just think that's a great spot to do it, and a great thing. They're actually up for an award in Brussels for the impact of the centre. So I think it'd be a good one to support, and a good one to do some investigation into that health inequalities piece.
I mean, I think that would be a good idea if everybody else is content that we accept their invitation. Okay, so then the next few are for noting. 10, 6, 7 is from the department, is an issue from the Department of Health, and it's a reply in relation to the cervical cytology review. So again, we're considering, once the completion of the review. Next one is an invite for all of us, so we've all got that, and we can reply individually to it. It's from the VOI PIC. I have replied to say I'll be there. Next one is Dan and Alan. We've dealt with that. So Next one is for Noton, and SOAS wrote to us requesting a copy of the reply, and so we've agreed that once we get it, we forward it to us. They've actually, Keith, in the middle of this meeting, sent an email asking for a copy of, because they're a bit concerned about some of the responses, so they've asked for a copy of the presentation. So are we content that we give it to them? Yep.
The one that we were given?
Yeah.
Oh, it doesn't have anything in it.
I know.
Yeah. So you jumped over one as well. Sorry, it was there just for noting. It's the one, the Belfast Telegraph one about energy drink ban. They've asked us a question about whether or not there's been a ban in England and whether we would comment about if there's one coming here. But could we check with the department about that? Because it is one that a lot of parents do have concerns about. They feel like they've given in to their children by giving them an energy drink, but it would be good to see maybe if there's some evidence being sought within the department as to whether or not the drinks do have a detrimental impact on younger people, and whether, if there has been a ban in England and other jurisdictions, if it's something that we might be looking at least towards moving towards.
Yeah, absolutely. To do that. And I mean, I'm going to throw it here. It might be something I'll bring up later on, but just the position with the sugar tax as well. You know, I think that, in my opinion, might require some kind of investigation. I mean, I think it might be a reserved matter, obviously, but just what, if anything, the department is doing. Do we get money? You know, what it's used for, etc., etc. So, I mean, are people content that we maybe include the issue of the sugar tax in that letter to the department?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I ask, sorry Keith, maybe you'll know this, will this come as LCM if it's passed in Westminster?
No, it's devolved. So we would have to introduce our own legislation to ban it.
Our own. So it wouldn't come here automatically for discussion, an amendment or anything?
In theory it could. So if the Minister said, I see what's happening in Westminster, I'd like Northern Ireland to be included in that, which like happened with the tobacco and vapes. So it could come that way.
Yeah.
So it could, but normally again the Assembly likes that we do legislation ourselves, but where there's an opportunity, ministers will consider that.
Could we ask the Minister if he's considering that? For writing to him, we might as well.
Okay, so the next are just noting, and we've already discussed the pulmonary fibrosis. So everybody content then with that? We get through that 75 reasonably quick.
We go back through them again just to double check.
Okay, members. So where are we at? Any other business? None. Thank you. Date, time and place of next meeting. So next meeting's Thursday 18th of September here, room 29, 2 p.m. So we're now going to go into closed session.